go back on the record. Ms. Yellam Raju.
Yes.
I have Exhibit 129 as having been admitted. It doesn't reflect as such on your latest list. Just FYI, I have written down that yesterday through Ms. Carter, 129 was admitted.
Okay.
I think it's the one with the Longhorn license plate.
Thank you for that.
No problem. Mr. Rucker, anything before we get Mr. Carter? Are there other Carters, or this is just two Carters? Okay. Anything before we get Mr. Carter back in here? How's your confidence level about the audio playing?
I've listened to it about 100 times. And it doesn't.
Okay. Mr. Harvey, anything before the jury comes in? No, sir. Okay. Mr. Sandlin, I don't get to say it before you go. Hey, Travis. Let's get the jury, please.
All rise for the jury. Jury's all present and accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy Kane.
You may be seated.
Welcome back from lunch. We are going to recreate the mood that we had just before lunch, which means I need the state to distribute the transcripts again. If you could get all 15 to Deputy Kane, he'll once again provide one to each juror. Any juror not have a transcript? Any juror not remember my instruction from before lunch about how the transcript is merely an aid and is not evidence? Seeing no hands, I trust you all have one and you all recall that instruction. We're going to try once again playing, I don't remember the number, 259, I got the digits. All right, 295.
Am I free to publish, Judge?
Please.
Tommy Lee is set. Sir, let me just be plain. Danny is about to send me to prison. Please erase this voicemail message, but call me right away. Y'all have no idea the problem this is causing. It's innocent, but it's absolutely nuclear for me. Please call me.
Anyone have any trouble hearing that? Seeing no hands? Any reason we can't collect the transcripts now, Mr. Rucker? No. Okay. Deputy Kane, I know you just got comfortable back there. If you would collect all 15, please. All right, Mr. Rucker, when you're ready.
In the message that we just heard, this was the voicemail message that you listened to on your phone that you testified about earlier. Correct?
Yes.
And in the voicemail message, the defendant actually identifies himself, doesn't he?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, did the defendant mention the word prison?
Yes.
Now, at the time that the defendant left this voicemail message for you, where he mentioned the word prison, was there a law enforcement investigation going on?
Well, if you know.
Correct. If you know.
I knew there was an investigation going on, yeah.
Right. Mr. Carter, we reconvened and you ended up a little far from the microphone. If you could move closer to the microphone. You're soft-spoken, which is great. Mr. Rucker sometimes asks people to use their outside voice.
Okay.
Either way, get closer to the microphone. Thank you.
What was your answer to my question?
Yes.
Okay. And at that time, did you know that your wife had been interviewed by the Atlanta Police Department?
Yes.
Did you know that it was in connection to what happened to Dale McIver?
Yes.
Now, at the time that you received this message, had the police authorities interviewed you? Had you been interviewed at that time by anyone from the police department?
I don't think so.
And as you sit here today, have you ever been interviewed by anyone from the Atlanta Police Department?
No.
Can you tell the jurors when is the first time that you told anyone associated with law enforcement about this voicemail message?
When was the first time I did what?
That you ever talked to anyone associated with a law enforcement agency? Like a DA's office?
It was the DA's office, yeah.
Okay. Would it have been your conversation with me back early last year?
Yes.
Now, were there other voicemail messages that were left by the defendant?
I don't think so. I think that was the only one.
Okay. Let me show you a document just to see if it helps to refresh your recollection, okay? Yes?
Okay.
Okay. Take a look at these. It's a 3-page document. Just read it silently to yourself.
Okay.
Okay? Now, after having read that 3-page document, can you tell the judge and the jury whether or not your memory is refreshed about whether or not the defendant left you any other voicemail messages?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And how many voicemail messages did he leave for you, in addition to the one we just heard?
I know it was several.
Okay.
The focus has been on the one you just played, so that's why I wasn't remembering all of them.
Okay. I'm going to show you a document, it's page 345. And if you take a look at stage 345, do you recognize your phone number on that document and the phone number for the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. And about how many phone calls do you recall having received from the defendant on the day that you were at Dale Cardwell's house?
I didn't know the exact number. I knew there was a lot.
Okay. If you take a look at State's Exhibit number 345, does that document reflect the phone calls between yourself and the defendant on the date that we are discussing?
Yes.
Okay. I would tender State's Exhibit number 345, Judge, in evidence. 345 is admitted. And I want to show you a couple of other exhibits. I'm going to show you some additional exhibits. This is State's Exhibits number 340 to 343. Take a look at each one of those pages. And do you recognize and can you identify those pages?
Yes.
And can you say that those pages accurately and fairly reflect what it's designed to show? That's an awkward question, isn't it?
It's a very awkward question. Let me shorten that.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay. I'll tender stage 340 to 343, notwithstanding the awkward question.
I get points. So.
I'm erasing the minus points. Did No. You're working, that moves you in that direction.
The ones that I didn't deserve to start.
State's Exhibit 345. Recognize this document to be call log history, calls between Claude Lee McIver and Thomas Carter Jr. on October the 6th, 2016. You recognize this to be that? Yes?
I did, yes.
Try to slide this sheet along, but I wanted to kind of zoom in, make sure everybody can see the numbers that are on the screen. Can you tell the jurors what time is the first time that there is a call between yourself and the defendant on October the 6th, 2016?
It was 8:45,
8:45. And how many seconds?
55.
Okay. And if I told you that this ET column reflects the estimated time of the call, that call lasted how long?
The first one, 42 seconds.
Okay. And that very first call was from, the originating number is, what's the last 4 digits?
8137.
And that number belongs to who?
Claude McIver.
And the terminating number is what?
That's my phone number.
Okay. Second phone call on October the 6th is at what time?
8:47 and 5 seconds.
Okay. It lasts how long?
12 seconds.
From who?
It's from Claude McIver.
To whom?
To me.
Okay. The third call, what time?
9:03 and 44.
What's the duration? How long?
35 seconds.
Okay. From whom?
It's from Claude McIver to me.
To you.
Yes.
Okay. Fourth call. What time?
11:43, 59,
How long did that call last?
35.
Okay. From whom?
It's from Claude McIver
To.
to me.
Okay.
Do we have to go through each one of these?
You don't want to?
I prefer not to.
Okay.
They're all from him to me.
Well, how about this one right here?
Okay, that's from me to him.
Okay.
That's the only
Right. Right. You said there were several. You didn't remember how many, correct?
I did not.
Okay. So are you surprised that it was this many?
No.
Okay. There's a call on here from you to Mr. McIver, correct?
Yes.
So how about you do this? Look at the document and tell the jurors how many phone calls are there from Mr. McIver to you before you call him back.
6.
And then after you call him back, what's the duration of the call between you and him when you call him?
It says 122.
And then the very next call is from who to who?
That's from him to me.
How long does that call last?
2:55.
And what time is that call?
12:48 and 32 seconds.
And is that the last call between you all?
Looks like there's one more.
Who calls who?
He called me
What time?
12:51 and 40 seconds.
How long does that call last?
49.
Seconds?
I'm
49
sorry.
seconds.
49 seconds, yes.
Now, can you tell the jury, at the time that you listened to the voicemail message from Mr. McIver, did you call him back?
I did call him back eventually.
Okay. And when you called him back, what did you say?
What is it that you want?
What did he say?
It was in regards to Danny.
Okay. What was it about Danny he was calling you about?
He was upset about the fact that she had hired an attorney to represent her.
And can you tell the jurors the attorney that Ms. Carter hired, do you know if he was a criminal or a civil attorney?
He was a civil attorney.
Do you know his name?
Lee Davis.
And tell the jury about this conversation about the defendant being upset because Danny Joe hired a civil attorney. That's what he said. Now I'm getting into the conversation without saying
Okay.
line by line, but what did you say when you said that?
I just said she hired an attorney to basically to fend the press off. They're hounding us night and day.
Okay. And at the time that you said that to the defendant, had he himself been calling you or your wife in order to have your wife make statements to the press?
Yes, he wanted her to.
And can you tell the jury, did that have anything to do with why you went to Dale Cardwell's house?
Yes.
So can you tell the jury, what about the rest of the conversation? Did it end right there?
That conversation ended. You got the phone call.
Phone call, yes. And in the voicemail message, he actually told you to delete it.
Yes.
And you did as he asked.
I did.
Now, can you tell the jury, did you express any feelings towards Mr. McIver about the voicemail message that he left you?
No.
You didn't tell him how you felt about that?
No.
Can you tell the jury, did Danny Joe ever do as the defendant asked and make any press statements describing the events of September 25th?
No.
State's Exhibit number 340 through 343. Can you tell the jury, what are these?
Looks like a list of the phone calls.
From whose phone?
From his phone to mine.
From his phone to yours. These photographs are they of your phone?
Yeah, it's got my number on there.
Right. And these photographs reflect the actual defendant's number coming into your phone?
Yes.
Okay. And these photographs are reflected on the document that you have there in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you have had a chance to be at the range and see the defendant actually handle and operate guns.
Yes.
And how would you describe your own knowledge of guns?
Pretty knowledgeable.
Okay. Have you actually been out there at the ranch and fired guns with the defendant?
Yes.
And how would you describe his knowledge of guns?
About the same, if not more.
About the same or not more as?
About the same as me, if not more.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you categorize yourself?
Probably 9.
Have you had the opportunity to see the number of guns that the defendant has at the ranch?
Yes.
And in your estimation, what is the number of guns he has at the ranch? And if you could delineate them by rifles, long guns versus handguns?
I couldn't put a specific number on it. There's a little bit of everything. There's handguns, there's rifles, there's shotguns.
And have you actually been with the defendant where you operated the handguns, the rifles, and the shotguns with him?
Yes.
You know him to be skilled with all different kinds of handguns, rifles, and shotguns?
Yes.
Can you tell the jurors, have you ever seen the defendant practice gun safety?
Yes.
And just give us some idea about what you mean by gun safety. What have you seen the defendant do with respect to that?
Just handle the weapon with respect. Keep the safety on to it until you're ready to fire it. You don't point the gun at anything you don't intend to shoot.
Speak up a little louder, Mr. Carter.
Yeah, you don't intend to point the gun at anything you don't intend to shoot. You keep the safety on until it's ready to fire.
Let me ask you this. Do revolvers?
I do.
And what kind of revolvers do you own? What is caliber?
I got 238s. I think that's the only revolvers I have.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, how do you store your handguns? When they're in the
I
home?
keep them in holsters.
You keep them in holsters?
Yes.
Have you ever stored them in plastic public bags?
No.
While at the ranch, have you ever had the opportunity to actually see where the defendant stores his guns?
Yes.
And how would you describe it?
It's in a safe, gun safe.
Have you actually had the opportunity to see inside the gun safe?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what's contained inside the gun safe?
Just all different types of firearms.
Does he also have ammunition for those firearms?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what is the largest caliber gun you would say you have actually seen the defendant fire?
Probably 45.
That's handgun, right?
That's right.
How about a rifle or long gun?
AR-15.
Judge, I'm going to move to admit a series of photographs. They are State's Exhibit numbers. Okay. All right. You give me 1 second. I'll put them in numerical order.
Sure.
Out of whack. And then I'm going to show them to the witness. For the record, Your Honor, I am showing to the witness the State's Exhibits number 57 through 60, 64, 66 through 68. Okay? Those photographs individually, and please tell us whether or not you recognize and can identify what is shown in each one of those photos.
Yeah, it's ammunition.
With the ammunition, how do you recognize that ammunition in particular?
I can just tell it's on the shelf in the closet in the garage.
At the ranch?
That's right.
Okay. How about all the rest of the photos?
Yeah, there's a gun safe here. This is the one that's in the barn.
Okay. How about the other photos?
More of the same, gun safe, ammo. Gun cases on the shelf.
Also there at the ranch? Yes.
Yes.
Do those photos fairly and accurately reflect the way the gun safe, the gun cases, the shelf, and the ammunition looks at the ranch of the defendant that you've seen with your own eyes?
Yes.
Okay. Understand there's no objection if the proper foundation is laid. I would tender those exhibits into evidence.
They're admitted 57 through 60, 64, and 66 through 68.
Yes, sir. State's 57. Can you just quickly identify that for the jurors? What is that? Photograph of?
It's ammo on the shelf.
There at the ranch.
Yes.
And are you able to tell how many different types of ammo can you make out in this photo?
I see 380. I see 38 special. I see 40 caliber. Looks like there's some shotgun shells. Can't really tell right there. That's
Okay.
22s.
Okay. Your State's Exhibit 58. How many different caliber or types of ammunition can you make out here?
I see a 45. Okay, the type is kind of small on the left side. It's a 30-30.
What is 30-30?
It's a rifle ammo,
Okay. This one here?
9mm.
State 64.
That's a gun safe that's in the barn.
State 66.
It's a gun safe with ammo.
State 67.
It appears to be the gun safe with ammo.
Do you know what type of bullets are these?
It looks like 308.
It looks like what?
308.
And what does that mean for people who don't
Looks
own?
like it's ammo for AR-15.
And again, the relevance of this, Judge, let me just make an objection
Okay, what we're,
to the last, with the books now. So, I don't know.
well, I'll allow, but are we wrapping up soon?
Yeah, we're
Because
wrapping up.
we haven't heard anything, I believe, about 308 in the trial so far.
I understand.
It sounds like that's rifle ammunition.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Understanding knowledge and proficiency, Judge.
Okay.
Okay. This is states 68, and what are these cases that we see in state 68?
Gun cases.
Those gun cases for what type of guns?
It appears to be for pistols.
Handguns.
Yes.
Okay. And how many gun cases do you see in that photograph for handguns or pistols?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like I see 5.
5. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is this. Can you tell the jurors, did you have an opportunity to come down here a couple days ago on Sunday?
Yes.
And who did you come down to the Fulton County DA's office with on Sunday?
I came with my wife.
Okay. And once you arrived at the office, can you tell the jurors, were you guys separated?
Yes, we were.
And did I have a chance to speak with you on Sunday at that time?
Yes.
And at that time, did you relate to me, after I asked you some questions, about an event that occurred involving a burnt finger for young Austin?
Yes.
And would that have been the first time that you and I have ever discussed that event?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Mr. Harvey, questions for Mr. Carter?
Can you see me over here? If I'm here, is that okay?
It's fine.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about you and Tex and Diane down at the old ranch.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
I'm going to ask you first.
No.
You can do.
You've been going down there for a long time, right?
Yes.
You and your wife have been going down together, correct?
Yes.
And you would ride down together with your wife,
Yes.
right? And it wasn't a unique experience that you would come back, you and your wife would come back, and Tex and Diane would stay Sunday night into Monday, correct?
Correct.
Or even y'all might stay over till Monday, or Danny may stay.
Sometimes.
Your wife may stay over. She gave me permission yesterday to call Danny Joe, okay?
Sure.
So if that's the way I refer to her,
That's fine.
I'm not being disrespectful.
Yeah.
Disrespectful. So it wasn't an unusual occasion when you went down that it would bleed over to Monday, correct?
Correct.
And would you stay, or would Danny Jo, would she come back?
Various scenarios could happen.
Sometimes it happened,
Yeah.
sometimes it didn't happen, but the ordinary situation was that you all, the Carters, had separate transportation.
Correct.
And that would be the ordinary state of things.
Yes.
Okay. You were gone. The ranch is a big facility, right?
It is.
Danny Jo had a horse down there, correct?
Yes.
And she would go down there and ride horses down there,
Yes.
right? And you knew that there were a number of trails, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that there were rolling hills and places at the ranch in which you could ride for either hours or shorter, correct?
Yes.
And that was not an unusual situation, even when you were down there, that folks would go out and ride and they'd stay gone for a while, correct?
Correct.
And the arrangement was that Danny Jo could keep her horse there, and it was exercised, and it was fed,
Yes.
and essentially you all would be able to go pretty much for the asking.
Yes.
I mean, there wasn't any, oh, you can't go this weekend, or, generally if you asked, it was a given, right?
Yes. They would normally invite us.
Okay. But if you wanted to go, you could just call up and say, hey, can we come down this weekend? And it would be unlikely that would be refused, correct?
Correct.
Did you all travel with them?
We did.
Did you go, for example, where did y'all get married?
Las Vegas.
And did Tex and Diane go to your marriage?
No.
Did
This
they?
is before they
Okay.
started dating.
All right. Do you know whether Diane paid for the marriage? For the trip to Las Vegas as a wedding gift?
No, I paid for us to go out there.
Okay. And so you all were married before Tex met Diane, correct?
Yes.
All right. When you would go out to the ranch, were there occasions in which there were large crowds out
Yes.
there? And were there occasions that you went out there where a number of people were engaged in, for example, target shooting
Yes.
or clay pigeon shooting?
Yes.
And when I say large crowds, there'd be a number of people there. And it was kind of a hosted event in which they would come down to the farm. Everybody or lots of people would get out the old guns that you told us that were on the ranch. And they would use the guns in the ranch, right?
Yes.
And they would use the guns on the ranch to shoot clay pigeons, to shoot at targets. And it was kind of, I don't know, it's a social gathering, but it was a social gathering.
Yes.
Lots of people enjoy the sport of target shooting, one,
Yes.
or shooting at clay pigeons, correct?
Yes.
The use of firearms as a social event is not something foreign to you, correct?
No.
And it occurred with regularity down at the ranch.
Yes.
And, Tex he provided the weapons, right?
I bring my own sometimes too.
But generally for these big gatherings that we're talking about, Tex had the weapons. He'd go into the safe, he'd get some of the weapons out.
Yes.
He'd provide everybody with the weapons that you would shoot, you would enjoy. It was a social occasion. They'd go back into the safe, right?
Yes.
Okay. How many occasions did that happen? On how many occasions did that happen?
Again, too many again.
Okay, so that was a regular occurrence as well, correct?
Yes.
All right, so we know that we've got an expansive farm, a ranch. There was horseback riding out in the woods. There were social events with weapons that were handed out and used on too many occasions to count, correct?
Yes.
The weekend of September 25th, 26th, your plan was to go watch the Dogs hopefully beat Ole Miss.
That's right.
And would it be the regular occasion for you to leave on a Thursday? On Friday? When did you leave that weekend? Do you remember?
I believe we left on Thursday.
To the best of your recollection. So you think you left on Thursday?
Yes.
Did you know whether or not Danny Jo had any plans for that weekend?
Yes.
She had already planned to go out to the ranch.
That's right.
With Diane, correct?
Yes.
So you knew that when you're at the ball game, Danny Jo was out at the ranch.
Yes.
Did you know how she planned to get there?
No.
Would it have been your understanding that just like ordinary, she would have driven her own car?
I would assume yes.
Okay, but because that's what always happened beforehand,
Yes.
right? And you didn't have any idea of any of the arrangements that had been made to get out there,
No.
correct? And in fact, I'm going to say the first time you knew about that was Sunday night,
Yes.
right? Okay. I mean, I'm gonna dive right in here.
Are you gonna ask me if you want to go? Don't be rude. Just ask me, I'll do it.
May I use?
Absolutely.
Can I write left-handed on it?
Absolutely.
You get back sometime late Sunday evening, right?
That's right.
And as I understand it, you're hanging at home, right?
That's right.
You hadn't heard anything at that particular point. It wasn't unusual because of what we just talked about. She may have been staying over there late. They may have been coming back late. They may be staying over till the next day. So you weren't thinking anything is amiss.
No, I was not.
All right. The first thing that you heard that night, because there was some, I think you used the word, funkiness with the phone,
Yes.
right? Was when Danny Jo called you or texted you.
Yes.
Okay, which one?
I believe it was a text.
Okay.
Yeah.
And likewise, they, I guess they could have retrieved that particular text, or we could have gotten the text that to reflect the actual words, but what you understood either from a text or from a phone, that your wife told you that what, there was an accident?
That's right.
Okay. DJC for your wife's name.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing that you got from your wife was the description that there was an accident, correct?
That's right.
You tried calling back, but you couldn't get through.
That's right.
But the words, the descriptive words were, there was an accident.
That's correct.
The next thing, you didn't hear back for a while, correct?
Correct.
The next thing that that occurred was that you got a call from Tex, correct?
That's correct.
I think that's what you told us about. Number two was
instruction to the witness, or you just writing down? I would get you are publishing anything for the jury without there being a question put to the witness.
Well, he said the next thing that happened was X, correct? And the witness answered, and so he is now memorializing as the state
I
has.
think the way he was standing, he was blocking my view, so
Okay.
I couldn't tell what you were writing.
Okay.
I said, could I write left-handed?
I didn't know that
I
meant you
can't.
blocked my view.
I can't. I can't.
You're so wide.
I gotta go. This way. If I stand sideways, I'll disappear.
Go ahead.
All right, please stand sideways then.
Uncalled for. Next thing was called from text, right? Now, I know that Mr. Rucker asked you about your phone records. Did he go through the phone records with you, or did he just hand you that and say, hey, man, this is what your phone records look like?
This is different. This is from the day that he called me.
Yeah, this
a week later.
is right, the 6th, but I'm assuming we introduced your entire phone records. Did you get to look at the phone records from the 25th or 26th?
No.
Would you disagree that Tex first called you at 1:22 a.m. on the
That sounds right.
okay. Call from Tex around 1:22 a.m. On that would be the morning of the 26th.
That's a Monday morning.
Okay. Right. And that phone call, according to the records, lasted 52 seconds. Did you have any disagreement? You've had an opportunity, I guess, to look at the actual records, and they're in.
That sounds about right.
Okay. I'm sorry. I've got my- I'm going to stand here. The one in your space, right?
That's fine.
And what Tex said to you, as far as I understand it, was he said to you, there's been an accident. Diane is dead.
Yes.
Now, you know now that at 1:22 a.m., Diane had been with APD, and she was down at that time, she was down at the police station.
I did not know that at that time.
You know it now?
Yes.
Okay. So when your wife called, there was an accident, what time did she text you?
Tex is the one who called me and said there's been an accident.
No. What time did Danny Joe say there was an accident? That's number one up there.
It must have been about 10:30, somewhere
Okay.
in that.
All right. The next thing that you hear is at 1:22 a.m., Tex calling you and saying, there's been an accident, same use of the word, correct?
Yes.
Diane is dead,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Didn't he follow that up by saying, you need to come down to the hospital as soon as possible?
Yes.
All right. So there's been an accident, Diane is dead, come on down to the hospital if
Yes.
you can. Right?
That's right.
That was the extent of the conversation.
Yes.
Did you say, Tex, what happened? What's going on? Who's hurt?
No.
All right. Well, Danny Joe didn't say that she hadn't been hurt. In other words, there was an accident. Did you know whether Danny Joe was hurt?
I didn't know.
Did you get on the phone and call any of the hospitals?
No.
Did you text her back and say, are you okay, honey?
Yeah, I tried calling her.
Okay. Well, she texted you. You knew the phone was messed up.
Yeah.
Did you text her back?
I'm sure I did. I don't specifically recall. I'm sure I must have. I mean, but I wasn't getting any communication about anything really, about what had happened
Okay.
until, the call on 122.
All right, so from 10 something, when you got the first text, till 1:22 a.m., you know from your wife that there was an accident. You didn't even know who was hurt. You didn't even know whether it was her.
I was in the dark.
Well, did you call? Did you try to reach out to Tex at 10:50? Say, Tex, has there been an accident? Is Danny Joe okay?
I don't think so. I was just communicating only to Danny.
Did you? Yeah. I mean, you knew Diane's phone number. You knew Tex's phone number. You got nothing from your wife, but you made no effort to reach out to find out how your wife
Via
was.
text to my wife. I know how these guys are. They're all good friends. They would have, if there's anything more serious than a minor accident, which is what I thought it was, I assume they would have called me. I assume one of them would have called me so that I wouldn't worry if it was something serious.
There was a 122 phone call. Do you remember talking to Tex again right after that?
Yes. This is after I taken my motorcycle down to the condo and collected the car. And he did call me between the condo and the hospital.
Okay. So you talked to Tex again.
I did.
And could that have been at 1:54? That would be about 30 minutes later.
That sounds about right.
Okay. Was there any other conversation at 1:54 about what may have happened?
No.
Okay. If the phone records show, that that phone call was lasted 3:09, 3 minutes and 9 seconds. Would you disagree with me?
I wouldn't disagree.
Okay. Did you ask Tex, is Danny Joe okay?
I was asking what happened, what's going on.
I thought you just said there wasn't any conversation about what happened.
I wanted to know what had happened.
I had just asked you during that conversation, was there anything about what happened during that conversation? You said no.
Well, I'd like to say that I did ask about my wife.
Right. And Tex said, you'd like to say that? You'd like to say that now? Or now you remember it a couple of years later, having never said it before? Is that what?
I know that I was concerned about the safety of all of them.
Okay. I'm asking you about the specific conversation. If you don't remember it, just say, I don't remember it.
I know that we spoke. I wanted to know about the safety of them.
You wanted to know about the safety of them.
Yes.
You
I
had
was
an
concerned about what had happened to my friends and my wife.
You had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Rucker in that conversation when you were so kind to invite him to your home. Do you remember that? He said that like 2 or 3 times.
What's the question?
The question is, you had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Rucker about this entire event, correct?
Yes.
Correct? He came to your house, correct?
Yes.
He asked you questions about the phone conversations that you had with everybody that night.
Yeah.
And he gave you the opportunity to give answers, as full answers as you wanted to give that evening, correct?
Yes.
He didn't stop you and say, yo, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to hear any more about that, correct?
No.
All right. So when he asked you questions about the sequence of events in the phone calls, did you tell him anything about the second 3 minute and 9 second phone conversation that you had with Mr. McIver that night?
I don't know if I did.
You want to look at a transcript of your statement? Would that help refresh your recollection?
It might.
Yes, exactly, Counsel.
Yeah. Hold on.
You have a copy of the transcript that I provided you. Does this match up? Let me have a look at the page.
I don't have a copy of the transcript.
Does Mr. Rucker have a copy of what is sitting in front of the witness?
I just gave him a copy. It's the first time I've seen it. So I don't know if this matches up with what the transcript was that I provided with Fed.
But if you now have a copy of what he's showing the witness, and he's telling you what page it's on, you have what he's using to refresh the witness's recollection.
It's just 18 pages of something I've never seen before.
Okay. Do you have a copy of the transcript you provided us that you didn't? I don't think it was a transcript.
Did you ever read it?
Whatever pages you want. You had a chance to look that over? I guess the pending question is, did you talk to them or tell Mr. Rucker about anything during that conversation?
The 309?
Yeah.
This one right here?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Right. He said, I was down there at Emory Hospital. Is that right?
That I was down there being me?
No. Tex says, I'm down here at Emory Hospital.
Okay.
I need you to come down here as soon as you can get down here. That was about the 122 conversation.
Okay.
Was there anything about the next conversation?
I don't know. You'll have to show it to me. I know what happened.
I just showed it to you. I'm sorry. If I was misleading you there or didn't ask.
So you're handing him how thick a document that you're asking him to read through to see if something's mentioned?
18 pages.
Okay.
But it's only on the first 2 pages. It would just be the first 2 pages because it's in chronological order. Could you just review the first 2 pages? I don't want to believe in this any more than I already have. You see anything in there?
Yeah, it's transcript of what I said.
No.
What's the question?
Okay, the question was there anything that was relayed to Mr. Rucker about the second conversation with Tex McIver at room 54? That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
And about the second conversation?
Yes.
And show me where that is so that we can tell the jurors.
So that he can tell
He
the
can.
jurors, not
He
you.
can, not we.
Right here.
Okay, great. In that second conversation, he called you again and said, we can't find Danny Joe, right? Is that correct? You guys say yes.
That's correct, yes.
Anything else?
That's all it says.
I'm asking you if there was anything else that you recollect.
that phone call.
Yes.
No, that was the gist of it, was they were concerned, they were in the hospital, they couldn't find her.
Okay. At that time, you already knew Danny Joe was not with, and Diane was not with us anymore, correct?
Correct.
Didn't know where your wife was,
Correct.
right? Hadn't heard anything else from your wife. Went by the condominium to pick up the vehicle, her car, correct?
Yes.
And then went down to the hospital.
Yes.
When you got to the hospital is when Mr. McIver, you saw him up on the first floor, or fourth floor, correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Maples was already there, correct?
Yes.
So this is sometime around 2:30.
That sounds about right.
On the morning of the 25th, correct?
It's Monday morning, yes.
And when he was talking with you, he gave you a brief, very brief description of what had happened, correct?
Correct.
And that brief description had started off by saying, he said again, didn't he, that there was an accident.
Yes.
So once again, that word was repeated, correct?
Correct.
And I'm sorry, did you ask him about any more details, or you just leave it alone? I mean, here was a tragic event.
Is this a compound question or statement? No, it sounds like it's a standard question on cross that we've heard before. I'll let him continue.
Gave you a brief statement, told you it was an accident, gave you a brief recitation. Did you inquire any more?
No.
And, you know, it was a situation in which there was a tragedy, correct?
Yes.
It wasn't really the time for in-detailed inquiry, correct?
That's correct.
And you felt it would not have been appropriate to get into the details of everything, correct?
That's correct.
And likewise, it seemed that that's what Tex was doing. He was giving you a brief overview and saying, okay, here's kind of what happened. You know, there's nothing left that can be said, right?
There's no need for it at that
Right,
time.
right. And you were sitting there, and you told us that you were sitting there with Mr. Maples, Tex, and you were sitting there for a while,
We were upstairs on the fourth floor just for a minute or two.
and then went downstairs.
Yes.
And when you were downstairs, it was kind of like silent. No one was sitting there. Nobody was saying anything.
It was pretty quiet.
Right. There was not a whole lot of small talk or chatter because it was inappropriate. Everybody was just sitting there, right?
Well, we did start talking. He did tell me Steve was a Vietnam vet.
Okay.
And we started talking about that.
And you knew that he was a Vietnam vet.
That's right.
He, being Tex, was a Vietnam vet.
Yes.
And one of the bonds that Tex and Steve Maples had, you understood, was that they were both Vietnam vets.
That's right.
And it's difficult as a matter of common sense and common humanity that you sit there and you sort of deflect questions about the tragedy that just occurred. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So it's not, it wouldn't be unusual as a matter of common sense and common knowledge that you just wouldn't be sitting there talking about the event, right?
That's true.
Okay. And when you say Mr. McIver had a calm demeanor, he's sitting there. A calm exterior doesn't necessarily show the internal turmoil or grief. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. I just know how I would react if that had happened to my wife.
That's how you would have reacted, but you don't know how other people might react, right?
That's true.
Okay. This wasn't a chit-chat environment, correct?
No. I will say this, though, there's nothing of consequence being said, if that's what you mean by chit-chat.
I think you
Yes.
covered this.
Yes.
I know you were planning on, so let's keep pivoting to the.
No, I wasn't planning on.
I didn't say it clearly. You were planning on pivoting. Please continue to pivot.
No, I was going to.
Great.
I was going to.
That was my sense.
Okay. People express I'm going to pivot.
Please. You sat down in the ER for a while, correct?
Yes.
When you sat down, there in the ER, did you go anywhere? You went to pick up Danny Joe, right?
Yes.
You left the ER. You went to pick up Danny Joe, brought Danny Joe back, correct?
That's right.
All right. And when you got back, did you sit there for a few more minutes?
We did.
All right. And that was the time in which Tex went into the anxiety protocol.
That's correct.
That was after Danny Jo had gotten back. You knew she had gone to the police department, right? Is that
At this
correct?
point, yeah.
You got to say yes.
Yes.
You know that she had talked to the police, correct?
Yes.
You know that she had already given a statement to the police about what had happened, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Tex knew that she had been at the police station, right?
Yes.
And he knew that she had already given a statement to the police, correct?
Yes.
Okay. After, how long did Tex get, how long was he doing the anxiety protocol?
I don't know, maybe 45 minutes to an hour.
And you understood that he was being seen by a doctor, right?
Yes.
And that a doctor was evaluating him, correct?
Correct.
And y'all were waiting to see what the results were.
Yes.
Did you know that he had been seen by a doctor? He'd been prescribed medication?
I knew that he'd been seen by a doctor.
And after that procedure was done, y'all were just sitting there. Was it you and Mr. Maples and your wife?
That's right.
And again, no extensive conversation about anything.
No.
Mr. Maples was sitting there, correct?
Yes.
Was he taking notes of anything?
You would occasionally take notes.
On his legal pad?
Yeah.
Okay. He would occasionally take notes of your conversation. There was nothing noteworthy about your conversation, was there?
Not that I can recall.
Okay.
Just occasionally he would scribble something down on his legal pad.
You don't know what he was scribbling?
What it was, I don't know.
Of course. When Tex was finished, you gave Tex and your wife a ride back to the condominium, right?
That's right.
And you understood that Danny Jo was going to spend at least a night or some time at the condominium.
That's right.
There was no problem with that because they, of course, and you all were close to Diane and Tex.
That's right.
And you understood that, again, as a common part of humanity, that comforting and having people who were close to Diane and close to them would be something that would be not out of the ordinary and expected, right?
Yes.
Then you went home.
Yes.
And it was a couple of days later that you came back.
Yes.
And you think that was on a Wednesday, correct?
I'm guessing it was a Wednesday. It could have been Thursday.
And I understand that could have been Thursday. Monday was the 26th. Tuesday was the 27th. Wednesday was the 28th.
Okay.
Could have been Thursday the 29th.
Could have been.
Okay. You understood that on the 28th, Mr. McIver gave a statement to the police. Did you understand that?
I didn't know that.
So when you went back to pick up, Danny Joe, this is you went upstairs to the condominium. When you got to the condominium, you weren't there for 2 seconds.
Just a few minutes.
All right. Well, a few minutes, somebody seconds. I know you weren't timing. You didn't have your stopwatch out. It wasn't something that you were paying much attention to. I understood that that Tex said, I want to sit down and talk about our stories. Right? Did you know whether she had already done that?
No.
Right. And do you know whether or not, you don't know whether or not it was after Tex had already given his statement, right? But you knew it was after Danny Joe had already given a long statement to the authorities, right?
Yes.
Okay. And it was, I guess, all right, not to get our stories straight, but to talk about it, correct?
That's best of my recollection.
Okay.
Yes.
After that, you understood that this became a media type event, right?
Yes.
I understood from you that the press was, and I'm going to use your words, I think you said hounding us. Hounding us to the extent that press people posing as customers would show up at your wife's business, right?
Yes.
There were people calling all the time, correct?
Yes. Banging on our door at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning.
Well, that's what I mean. The next thing was calling. The next thing was physically coming to your house.
Yes.
It is not something that you have dealt with before.
No.
It was certainly not anything that Danny Joe had dealt with before.
No.
And it was a situation that you wanted to avoid. You wanted to get out of that hot spotlight
Yes.
for the media.
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things that I understood that you wanted to do was get a lawyer to handle the media.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
And did you get a lawyer to handle the media for Danny Joe?
No.
Did Danny Joe get a lawyer to handle the media for herself?
Yes.
And did she hire a lawyer?
I'm not sure how she hooked up with Lee Davis, but it did happen.
And I understand the purpose of that lawyer was to try to help you deal with the media.
That's correct.
Okay. And I understand that before these particular conversations on October 6th that you've told us about, and we'll talk about here in a second, that that one of the things that was being requested of Danny Joe was that she give a statement to the media, correct?
Sort of.
Okay,
There's
well,
two
give
parts
a
of it.
statement to
I said
either.
there's two parts to
You
it.
said there were two parts to
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
Were you trying to finish and then you were spoken over?
I'm sorry,
Tell us the two parts.
The part where Lee's main job was to keep the media at bay. And now I lost my train of thought about the two parts.
Well, it comes back to in response to one of the questions. He didn't mean to speak over you.
I understand.
I didn't, and let's talk about those two parts,
Okay.
because I think I can help you refresh your recollection.
Okay.
There was one part where Texas lawyers wanted to get a statement
Right.
from Danny Joe. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And there was one part where the lawyers wanted Danny Joe to give a public statement.
Well, yeah, it was our understanding that there were going to be members of the AJC were going to be at that deposition.
Okay.
That was our understanding.
It's two parts. One is there was going to be a statement, and that statement, however it was taken, would have been made public, correct?
Yes.
All right. And with regard to that statement, had Tex said to Danny Joe, "Here's what I want you to say"?
No.
At the statement?
No.
Okay. So, as I understand it, the statement was to be, Danny Joe, tell them whatever it is you're going to tell them. Right? Just tell them the truth.
I don't know what they wanted to do.
Okay. And secondly, just tell them the truth, but hey, let's tell it to the media as well. That was their
Well, I
strategy.
wouldn't say let's tell it to the media. It's like you tell it to the media.
Great.
He wasn't
You
making
tell
any
it.
statements.
He'd already given a statement. He'd already given a statement on the 28th.
So you are asking a question, or are you trying to assert as fact for this jury and this witness that something had happened?
Comma, correct?
Do you know that he has? Go ahead, ask me how you want, but
All right.
please make it a question.
Fine. It was requested that Danny Joe give a statement, and that statement be released to either by her or otherwise to the media, correct?
Yes.
And nobody, neither Tex nor Mr. Maples, had told Danny Joe what to say.
That's correct.
And when the context for these phone conversations was this press conference / statement was supposed to be, I guess, on the 6th.
I suppose.
Well, the night before, I guess on the 5th.
Yes, because I'm looking at this phone record here. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay. The night before is when you went to Dale Cardwell's place.
That's right.
And that was a decision by you all, family unit, to get out of the media spotlight
Yes.
and to not do that. You just weren't going to do it.
Right.
Okay. So, did you pick up the phone and say, hey, we're just not going to do this?
No.
Do you know whether Danny Joe picked up the phone and said, you know, I've thought about it again, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do
No.
that?
No. Honestly, we just wanted to be left alone by everybody.
That's great. I get it. But there was something already planned. In fact, a car was sent to get you guys. Or a car was going to be sent to get you guys.
That's what I understood.
Okay. But I understand you wanted to get out of the spotlight, but you didn't tell anybody that you weren't showing up or nothing's going on?
No, we did not.
Okay. So on October 6th, early in the morning at 8:46, there was the first phone call from Tex, right?
That's right.
And showing you what's been marked and you've identified as State's Exhibit number 340. That's your screenshot, right?
Yes.
And that's the screenshot of the voicemail that comes in, correct?
I assume it is.
What do you assume it is? You're the one that
It says
identified
19 seconds is the one I'm looking at right here.
I get it. But you've identified State's Exhibit 340 as a screenshot of the first call or voicemail that was left for you on October 6th.
Okay.
Am I correct about that?
It was a phone call, yeah.
Okay. And there was a voicemail left, wasn't there?
There were voicemails left, yes. I don't know.
I think with respect to this particular call, he's saying he doesn't know.
And it's what I've heard several times.
All right. That would indicate to you that the voicemail that was left was, in fact, 19 seconds, correct?
If that's the one, yeah. I mean, like I said, he called a bunch of times that morning.
So the question isn't, is that one the one that we listened to? I'm understanding the question to be, does it appear to you, based on that screenshot, that at 8:46 in the morning, a voicemail was left for you that was 19 seconds long? Not was it the, as in the one that
Yeah,
we listened to?
I could go along with A.
Okay.
And again, this shows that there was a voicemail left that morning at 8:46 of approximately 19 seconds. There's an outgoing message, right? There's an outgoing message when you get a phone and a voicemail, right? You had an outgoing message.
Yes.
All right. So if the phone records show a longer call, the call is connected, an outgoing voice message goes out, and then there is a voicemail. Correct? That's left.
Yes.
Okay.
Where is it?
I'm going to take the second. You can look up there, look on there. Because at 8:46, that first phone call took 21 seconds to connect. The time of the phone call was 42 seconds, but your phone shows a 19-second voicemail. Right? You understand what I'm saying?
No.
All right.
I see time, it says 21, and then it says ET, it says 42.
Seizure time, as opposed to estimated time. When you identified this exhibit for Mr. Rucker, did you understand what it was that the exhibit was showing?
Yeah, it was about the voicemail. Voicemails.
Well, the exhibit itself. Had that been explained to you? Did you have an opportunity to look at it before? Or are you just saying, well, yeah, I guess that's what the record shows?
This is a phone record of him leaving me messages the morning of October 6th.
8:45, 55, estimated time 42 seconds. Do you see that?
Yeah.
All right. Your voicemail shows a voicemail of 19 seconds.
Okay.
All right. Can we play the other three? The other evidence? I'm asking.
Okay, sure. This won't contain just as 10-year-old.
Please, this is nuclear. It's innocent, but please call me back. You remember that?
He also said she's trying to send me to prison.
And he also said, erase this, correct?
He did.
All right. And you didn't call him back at that particular point, right?
I did not.
You called him after that, though, correct?
Later, yes.
Later that same morning, though. You know, half an hour or so later, right?
No, it was late morning.
Okay. Would you tell us when the last call from Tex to you was? Before you called him back?
Him to me,
Before you called him back?
12:16,
All right. What time did you call him back?
12:35.
Okay. So about a half an hour later. Right?
That's right.
Okay. And a half an hour later, after he told you to call, you called him, right?
Yes.
And what his concern was why did Danny Joe hire a lawyer, right?
That's right.
His concern was why did Danny Joe hire a lawyer? Because he thought, this is what he expressed to you, this is what Tex expressed to you, he thought Danny Joe hiring a lawyer made him, Tex, look guilty.
That's right.
Right? He didn't express to you, here's what I need Danny Joe to say. Did he?
No.
He didn't express to you, tell Danny Joe not to tell the truth.
No, he did not say that to me.
Okay. And the whole reason he called was about Danny Joe having a lawyer, not about her statement, not about what to say, not about who to say it to, or anything of that nature, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And you said, I don't understand that because it didn't make any sense to me.
What didn't make any sense to me?
Him asking you that, right?
I don't understand the question.
You said to yourself, I didn't really understand that reasoning. Do you remember that?
Right. The reason is, my thinking was, why is it okay for him to get an attorney, but it's not okay for my wife to get one?
Okay. Sure, it didn't make it, you didn't understand the reasoning.
That's what I didn't understand.
All right. Was there another conversation in which, do you know whether he had a conversation with Danny Joe that day?
I don't know. I don't think so.
So the only thing related to these messages was, gee, he got a lawyer. She got a lawyer. Right?
Right.
There was a time, I guess, that you told us about that you were standing at the farm with Tex.
Yes.
And he made the statement you told us about. I'm rich as shit. What you said.
Yeah.
When was that?
Sometime in the past 10 years.
Sometime in the past 10 years. Okay. And sometime in the past 10 years, he's standing there looking at his farm. And he's got a nice farm.
Yep.
Right? He had a great wife. Correct?
That's right.
He had a great wife and he had a great life, didn't he?
Yes.
You understood he was a successful lawyer at a major national law firm.
Yes.
He's married to a beautiful woman who was successful in her own right.
That's right.
Correct? So sometime in the last 10 years, he said, you know, I'm rich as shit. And richness is a blessing that can mean I have a rich and fulfilling life, and I'm happy with it. Right?
It could be that, yeah.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Mr. Parker, any redirect?
I just want to talk to you really briefly. Okay, Mr. Carter, just a couple of questions. Because you've actually been down here waiting to testify for a couple of days, correct?
Yes.
And I appreciate you coming. Listen, this whole conversation that you had with Mr. Harvey about the phone call that you received from the defendant, wherein he tells you, hey, you know, Danny Joe's about to send me to prison, and that conversation, right?
Okay.
When you called him back and y'all were talking about that, what you told Mr. Harvey was that you were kind of thinking to yourself, why is it not okay for my wife to have a lawyer because the defendant has a lawyer, right?
That's right.
And at that time, you guys had engaged Lee Davis. Lee Davis was representing Danny Joe and yourself, right?
Yes.
And the purpose of Lee Davis representing Danny Joe and yourself was what?
To keep the press at bay.
Right. And tell the jurors, what was it that the defendant was trying to get you to do on October the 6th?
Wait. Get him to do? I objection.
I'm sorry, Danny Joe. I misspoke. Danny Joe.
To go make a statement, a deposition at Steve Maples' office.
Right.
Where there probably would be reporters present.
Right. And can you tell the jurors, do you know, only if you know, do you know whether or not Lee Davis had called Steve Maples and said you guys weren't coming? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. Let me talk to you just a minute about the conversation you had with Mr. Harvey about this phone call on the way to the hospital, and he asked you some questions about whether or not you asked about Danny Joe. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just ask you this. Did you get a chance to look at the transcript to see exactly what the content of the second phone call was?
Yes.
Okay. Do you need to see a copy of the transcript again to refresh your recollection, or do you remember the content of that second phone call?
I remember. The gist of it was, we can't find Danny Joe. We don't know where she is.
We can't find Danny Joe. We don't know where she is.
That's right.
Who said that to you?
Texted.
Now, at that time, did he say anything to you about, hey, the police have come and separated us and taken Danny Joe and we don't know where she is?
No.
Did he even tell you that the police had gotten involved at that point?
No.
He just didn't know where she was, right?
Yes.
And when you all returned from APD, when you picked up your wife and you said, you know, she looked like she was in shock, you had never seen her look like that before, is that right?
That's right.
Now, when you got back to the waiting area, can you tell the jury, was there ever any time that you witnessed Mr. Maples asking Danny Joe any questions about what happened?
I don't recall that, no.
You do recall, though, that he took notes?
Yes.
And at the condo, either it was Wednesday or Thursday, I know you're not sure, about when you would have heard the defendant make the statement that you talked to Mr. Harvey about, which was about, let's talk about our story, correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as you knew, by that time, had Danny Joe ever revealed to the defendant what it was that she said to the police on that early Monday morning?
I don't know.
If he knows, is what I asked. Could have been present for the conversation. I just want to know if he knows.
Don't stop.
I don't know if she had shared anything with him. I don't know.
Okay.
About what she said to the police.
Okay. Tell me if you know this. In the days and weeks, or in the days and up until October the 6th of 2016, was the defendant trying to get Danny Joe to make a statement about what she would say happened inside the vehicle? Is that what the defendant was trying to do?
Up to that is speculation other than whatever conversations they may have had, otherwise it would be.
I can ask a better question.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that question, we have been working through this with Mr. Carter for a while.
Yeah.
It's okay for both sides to ask, so.
Yeah.
But if you want to ask it in a different way.
Ask it a different way.
Okay.
Did he say that to you?
Can you rephrase it?
Yeah. Did Mr. McIver say that he wanted Danny Joe to make a public statement about what she witnessed inside of the vehicle?
I don't recall that. I don't think he said something like that to her.
Okay. And he never said nothing like that to you?
Not my presence.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Oh, wait a minute.
If jurors have any questions, please pass your cards to the left. And Deputy Kane, he's having to fly solo today. You're doing a great job, Deputy Kane. I appreciate that. Our human sponge needs more water. Mr. Samuel's going to handle the questions from the jurors for both sides.
I was trying to figure out how to ask better questions.
That's a long voice. You mentioned that's the phrase you used. Was something that Mr. McIver initiated or that the ER staff initiated? And here's what I mean by that. Is that something that he sought out? Again, this is only if you know. Or did personnel come up and say, oh, you need an anxiety protocol?
Yeah, it was him.
Okay. While your wife was staying at the condominium for those first few days after Ms. McIver's death, were you in regular communication with her?
Yes.
Did you ever receive a loan, ask for and get a loan from Ms. McIver?
No.
There was a time when your wife and Ms. McIver were distanced or estranged. Did you maintain contact, friendship with Ms. McIver and Mr. McIver during that break?
I did not.
And follow up, Mr. Rucker. Mr. Harvey?
No. Two-letter answer.
But with you, it never is. Then there's other words, and it becomes a longer answer. Mr. Carter, you can take that water with you. The restroom is outside. And we appreciate your time. The entire Carter family is free to go.
Thank you.
Mr. Rucker,
Yes.
next witness.
Yes, sir.
We may not get all the way through the witness before we take a break, but let's start with the next witness.
Sure. The statement called Dale Cardwell.
Can you raise your right hand for us? You swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give to the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, please have a seat. For the court's purposes, can you please state your name and spell it?
Dale Cardwell, D-A-L-E-C-A-R-D-W-E-L-L.
Now, hold on a second. Let me, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you mind turning and introducing yourself to the jurors by restating your name, and if you could share with them a little bit about what you do for a living?
Sure. My name's Dale Cardwell. I'm a consumer investigator. I own a website called TrustDale.com, host a
I'm
TV
sorry,
show,
slow down. You have a website called what?
TrustDale.com.
Pretend you're talking into the camera now, slowly, what your viewers hear. You co-recorded it. Take this down.
Yes, sir. So I get to the bottom of consumer problems. People send me emails with unsolvable situations, and we work on them. We also investigate companies and hold them to a 7-point investigative standard. And if you hire one of these companies based on my recommendation, I guarantee your experience.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors how long have you done that kind of work?
I've been a journalist for 32 years, conventional journalism, television station, 25 years, and I've been doing what I do now for about 8 years.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, are you acquainted with Diane McIver?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury how so?
So I met Diane probably back in 2004. I was a reporter. I was covering a story, and it involved her boss, the owner of the company, Billy Corey. And I was stunned at the treatment that he was getting in a situation, in a lawsuit that he was involved in. And I covered the story. And then after I left Channel 2, I got to be friends with him, and I considered him my business mentor. And of course, Diane was the president of U.S. Enterprises, and got to know her at the time.
And can you tell the jurors your interactions or relationship with Diane McIver and Billy Corey? Did they remain a strictly kind of business, professional relationship, or did it evolve into something personal?
It involved, became something personal. Very close friends, Tex, Diane, Billy, group of people, really sweet group of people that I think a whole lot of.
Yeah. Would that include Danny, Joe, and Tom Carter?
Yes.
And did you get so close with Diane and Billy, Diane McIver and Billy Corey, that you would actually participate in kind of what we've heard a little bit about on a Friday afternoon, wine sipping get-together?
Diane was a connoisseur. She was an expert in that area, and I was a novice. But yeah, those were some fun times.
Okay. Now, I really want to just direct your attention to just a couple of particular areas. Now, your interactions and relationship with the defendant, Tex McIver, can you tell the jurors, did it ever spill outside of just a casual, personal relationship?
Yes, Tex and I had a business relationship. He represented me on certain matters, legal matters. He gave me legal counsel.
Yeah. And what would your opinion be of his acumen as a lawyer?
Meticulous.
Meticulous. Can you tell the jury, did you have an opportunity to see how Diane McIver and her husband, Tex McIver, interacted with each other?
Yes.
How would you describe it?
Playful. She was dominant, but in a way that didn't seem to bother him that much. It was fun.
Okay. Okay. That's it?
Yeah.
Okay. Did it never appear to be uncomfortable for you?
It was uncomfortable at times.
And why is that?
Because at times it would go a little too far, perhaps.
What would go too far?
The direction. If Diane wanted to do it, that's what we did. That's what he did, and that's the way it was.
That's the way it was. Without telling us anything that she might say in these circumstances, would she say something?
Yes.
How would you characterize the things she would say to the defendant when she wanted things to go her way?
They could be demeaning.
Demeaning. Now, can you tell the jury when and how did you find out that something had happened to Diane McIver?
Mr. Corey called me. My wife and I were in San Francisco at the time, and it was very early in the morning. and I was
I
stunned.
was going to object to what Mr. Corey might have told Mr. Cardwell.
Well, of course, he didn't say what Mr. Corey told him. So, yeah.
Let's keep it that way.
Yeah. So, can you tell the jury, did you have any conversations with the defendant once you found out that his wife had passed away?
We exchanged text messages, and I've talked to him a few times since.
Okay. Can you tell the jurors, when was the first time you would have had any communication with the defendant, either by text message or by a verbal conversation?
It was the day of. It was later in the day
Okay.
that she passed.
Would you recall that would be Monday, September 26th?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors any idea about what time you would have exchanged any communication with him?
Again, I was in San Francisco, and I think it was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in San Francisco.
Okay. And so that's about what time here in Atlanta?
Oh, gosh.
I'm making you do a little math.
Right. What is that? Probably 8 p.m.?
And was your first communication with the defendant by text message or by verbal communication?
It was by text message.
And do you remember the substance of the text messages?
I texted him and I said, "I am so sorry," and he texted back and said something to the effect of, "Thank you much."
Now, you've told us that there were kind of a series of back and forth, either text messages or conversations. Can you tell the jury when is the first time you recall having an actual conversation with the defendant?
Not long after, we had a phone conversation. We mentioned going to lunch together, and we didn't.
Okay. Why not?
I was uncomfortable.
Can you tell the jury the first time you got the opportunity to speak with the defendant, was there ever any conversations about what happened on the inside of the SUV during the course of the shooting?
None at all.
No. Did he ever relay to you any details, any facts, any circumstances about what happened inside of the SUV during the course of the shooting?
Not at all.
Now, can you tell the jurors, on or about October 5th, October the 6th, did you come into contact or have a phone conversation with either Danny Joe Carter or Tom Carter?
I did.
Which one did you talk to?
Danny Joe.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, without telling us what Danny Joe said to you, what was it that was going to happen after you talked to her?
You know my objection to that.
So we're at an area where I think we got with Mr. Carter as well. If you want to ask this witness, after you talk to them, what happened, you can do that.
Okay.
Because of the objection that has been interposed.
Okay. After you talked to Danny Joe Carter, what happened?
She and Tom came over to our house.
And after she talked to you, or during the conversation, did she explain to you the reason why she wanted to come over to your house? Did she explain to you?
She did.
Okay. And after she explained to you the reason why, was it okay for you if they came over?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell the jury, when you actually got a chance to see Danny Joe Carter and Tom Carter there at your house, did Danny Joe give you any details about what happened inside of the SUV?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell the jurors, did Danny Joe Carter share with you any details about what had transpired between herself and the defendant at Emory University Hospital immediately after the shooting?
Yes.
Can you tell the jurors, during that conversation at your house, would that have been on October the 5th or October the 6th?
I believe that would have been the 5th.
Okay. Can you tell the jurors, did Danny Joe Carter tell you any information about what the defendant said to her while they were together alone at the hospital?
Yes.
Can you tell the jurors, did she say anything to you about any statements about staying out of it or anything like that?
Again, let me object to this move to strike. This was deliberate, not got a motion.
Okay. Let's go one at a time. How is...
You do this, sidebar.
No, I understand. You'll get on the record what you need to get on the record, and you preserve it. How is this not hearsay?
I believe she was impeached on this very issue by cross-examination by Mr. Harvey.
Okay. Do you disagree with that?
Yes, I disagree with that, and I think, and I also, I need to explain.
Okay. Why don't we take our afternoon break now, since we're only going to 5-ish. It's close enough to 3:30-ish. So we'll take our afternoon break. We'll get you back in here in about 10 minutes, or as long as it takes to work through this, if it takes longer than 10 minutes. But please, while you're enjoying your break, don't talk about the case. Don't talk about Dale Cardwell, because he's part of the case right now. Just enjoy your break and your snacks, and we'll get you back in here. Okay? Thank you.
All rise for the jury.
And Mr. Cardwell, while they're going that way, I'm going to ask you to go that way so that I can have these folks speak freely without influencing your recollection.
Yes.
Thank you so much. But don't leave, just be inhaling frequency outside. All right. So, Mr. Rucker, let's start with you and tell me what it is you're expecting Mr. Cardwell to say and how you think that rebuts the impeachment that occurred. And then I'll hear from Mr. Harvey, and then we can work through it.
Yes. My recollection is, Your Honor, that on several times during cross-examination, Mr. Harvey, my belief is, impeached Danny Joe Carter with respect to the specifics of the conversation in the waiting room when it was she and Mr. McIver, and she has testified that he said, listen, I don't trust these guys. I want you to say that you're just a family friend, and you just kind of are here. And she says, hey, I can't lie. Well, she was impeached on several occasions. She didn't tell that to Investigator Ricker. She didn't tell that to Detective Smith, even though he asked her at the end, is there anything else important you want to say? She didn't tell him then. And she went months and months and months and months. And she didn't tell anybody until she met with our office February the 2nd. And so, casting the impression that, of course, it did not occur.
Okay. And this would be an instance, assuming Mr. Cardwell is going to relay something similar to what we heard here in court from Ms. Carter, an instance where she said that much earlier in time than when she met with your office.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And I think that goes to rehabilitate her credibility. And I expect, so the court knows, I expect that Mr. Cardwell will say that at the hospital after the shooting, Danny Joe says that Tex told her to stay out of it, which is exactly what she testified that he said.
Okay.
And so I think it's relevant. I don't think it's improper. I wasn't trying to do anything, in violation of the law. I think this is.
But it's certainly relevant.
Yeah.
I don't need to hear anything to the contrary from the defense, but there may be some other gears spinning here. So, Mr. Harvey, your thoughts on this?
My thoughts on this are, here's the statement that we were given.
Now, whose statement?
Mr. Cardwell's.
Okay. Were you given a summary drafted by...
Summary.
Okay, so there are no quotation marks. I, Dale Cardwell, hereby say the following.
Right.
Okay.
Right. understanding is that if he's asked this question, Danny Joe says that Tex told her to stay out of it. That's not what she testified to. Didn't say to stay out of it. That's not what she said.
Okay.
In fact, she said, tell me you're here as a family friend.
You don't need to get involved with this.
Yeah, not necessarily, you don't need to get involved with this, but, I don't, like, we can keep you away from this media circus.
Okay.
And so Tex did not say stay out of it. I mean, that's like an affirmative, don't, just stay out of it. Just, you're out of it.
Okay.
And I don't think that impeaches what she says. And I don't know exactly if that's exactly what he's going to say.
Would you have him say it now outside the presence of the jury?
We could.
Are you requesting that?
I am.
Okay. Well, let's do that.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
All right. There is more. Dang, it was only an hour later.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't listening.
And while they're conferring, I'd like the record to reflect that I'll wait.
Please do.
Which happens to be correct.
Okay.
I would say that in order to put it in a prior consistent statement, it has to be made at the time there was not necessarily any motive to make it.
Can you stop wiggling the papers right now? Thanks.
Under the Tony Rule TONE, United States Supreme Court case, which the Georgia courts followed, and the federal rules obviously followed. So I would add that to an objection that this was made after previous statements were made. It wasn't made at a prior time. Right.
An interpretation of your cross-examination, a reasonable one, and one that I could foresee the defense sharing with the jury in closing, isn't it interesting that to law enforcement, right after the incident, even when asked, is there anything else important you think we should know? Ms. Carter didn't say these things. And yet when she's with the DA, playing all nice to her, she didn't want to get in trouble with the DA, she comes up with this other thing. We've got Mr. Cardwell, who, even though he can investigate fraud, is not law enforcement. And to Mr. Cardwell, she says something. I don't know that this, that seems to me to take it outside the Tomei concern. So maybe I'm missing something.
Because the first statement was the first two statements were to law enforcement. And then after she talks to law enforcement, and before she's confronted with that, we have this particular statement.
Right.
So I think it comes directly within the Tomei rule.
What would her basis for fabrication be that would have popped up by the time she's talking with Dale Cardwell, not law enforcement?
It seems to me that if she is about to give a statement, she's about to give a statement.
She's avoiding a statement. She went to Cardwell to avoid a statement.
But she was supposedly about to give one. And that statement was going to be released. She had the opportunity to say something to the authorities at the time, and now we're trying to get a prior consistent statement in.
Yes.
Yes. And I think that it had to be made at a time prior to the time she gave her first statement to the authorities.
Okay. I hear you on that. So I'm going to give you guys a break so that I can consult my appellate section, which is sitting right here in the chair with me. I'll get back to you on it. Anything you want to add, Mr. Rucker? There was something that you were holding in your hands, but it was still Mr. Harvey's turn to be talking.
Yeah, I think when I recited to you what it was I expected Mr. Cardwell to say, and when defense counsel recited to you what we expected Mr. Cardwell to say, at least what we turned over in terms of a summary of notes of what our interview revealed, we both left out the last part.
Okay.
So this is it verbatim, just for the record. At the hospital, comma, after the shooting, comma, Danny Joe says that Tex told her to stay out of it, period. Meaning, comma, the events of the shooting, period. And I think that's kind of relevant to put it into some context.
Okay.
Because
I think that is,
yeah.
not to overuse the word consistent, that is consistent with the tenor you were giving it and what we have heard her say in court. All right. I'll give you guys a few minutes. I'll come back out and either we don't even need to hear from Mr. Cardwell because you couldn't ask it, or we ought to hear what he's going to say, because if it's real different from what you relayed, it might not, in fact, it might be a prior inconsistent statement, and you may still want to use it, or Mr. Harvey may suddenly want to use it.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there something? Ready, Ms. Price?
Yes.
All right. Maybe we should get Mr. Cardwell in here so that he can give us a test run of what it is he's going to say. I find that it is appropriate for the state to ask the question, assuming the answer actually does connect with what it is we talk about. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Cardwell. Absolutely. I'm going to have Mr. Rucker ask you a question or two outside the presence of the jury. As you know, they're not in here right now. And then it may be that Mr. Harvey has a question or two. And then we'll either be able to bring the jury right in, or unfortunately, we may need you to step back outside again for a second. I apologize. But that's how sometimes these things play out. Okay. Mr. Rucker.
Yep. So, Mr. Cardwell, all we're talking about is the statement or statements that Danny Joe would have made to you on the evening of October 5th that I think we already established that occurred at your home, wherein I think I got you to a point where my frame of reference is at the hospital, and it's regarding a conversation between Danny Joe and the defendant, okay? And if you were asked that question to tell the jurors what Danny Joe said to you occurred between her and the defendant at the hospital that evening after the shooting, what would you say that she told you?
I would say that she said that Tex was acting strangely. He didn't seem to be speaking or thinking things that she thought were consistent with someone that should be in deep grief. She said that he was suggesting that she leave, that he had suggested that she leave, and that he had indicated to her that he had called Steve Maples, his attorney, and she said he seemed to be in a strategy situation rather than a grief situation.
Okay. Let me ask you this specifically. Did she tell you anything about Tex telling her to stay out of it or anything like that?
Yes.
Can you be real specific about that area and tell us what did she tell you about that?
She said that Tex had suggested that she didn't need to be involved in it at all, and that at one point he had said it might be best if you leave.
Okay. And the thing that she expressed to you about Tex saying her not being involved in it at all, what was it about? What was it that he was trying to get her to not be involved with?
Well, I think the counsel's speculation on his part, I think he can respond to what was said, not what he thinks about what she meant.
Okay. I'm going to allow it in this setting, just so we're fleshing it all out, and then if we're going to pursue it at all in front of the jury, we'll be able to appropriately cabin it.
Right.
So point well taken, but go ahead.
I understand. And I'm really focusing on this part about her staying out of it. Did she say to you, what was that in regards to? Staying out of what? You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I think she was not certain, but she felt as though it was both, that she was never involved and never in the vehicle, and that she was not at the hospital.
Okay.
Now, can I stop here and make an objection? We're going to need to flesh that out on the cross-examination. My understanding is that it was Mr. Cardwell's sense of what she was saying, that answer was applied to not what she physically, what she actually said.
That's what I heard him say as well. So you don't need to object. I think that just informs how we're going to proceed.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Can you tell the jurors, did Danny Joe tell you any other details regarding this conversation with the defendant? Let's just flesh it all out, I guess.
We discussed whether Diane was conscious or not, whether she was able to communicate with anyone. We discussed where they were physically in the lobby, in the waiting area.
She told you that?
Yes.
And she was in the lobby waiting area at the time she had the conversation with the defendant?
It's my understanding.
Okay. Did she ever say anything to you that the staying out of it had to do with the events of the shooting?
I recall that she believed that it was the entire matter.
Okay. The events in the SUV?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's all my questions.
Mr. Harvey, anything you want to ask at this juncture or in connection with this?
No, I understand. I'll take a free shot. I don't think so, based upon the answers that I'm hoping you heard in the same context that I heard those answers.
So my sense from this is that the question, it might end up being two that would be appropriate, is, and it would be somewhat leading, but that's so that we keep it in the zone that I think is appropriate here, would be what Mr. Cardwell recalls Ms. Carter telling him about the conversation that Mr. McIver and Ms. Carter had about whether she ought to stay involved in this or not. I haven't worded that well, but that's what
I know what you mean.
And not he seemed to be strategizing, things like that. I understand the state might really, really want to get into that, but that's not, one, what you got notice of, but two, the particular thing that Mr. Rucker has articulated as the area of impeachment and where I was doing my Tomei analysis of, well, this is really, when was the motive to fabricate and whatnot, is that narrow question of stay out of it or not, however you want to word it. But that, I think, insofar as that's discussed, is appropriate. The other things, right now, I don't think there's a basis for them to come in.
And here is what I heard the answer to be within those confines that you just described. That she said, Tex said that she didn't need to be involved in it at all. Those are the words I think that Mr. Cardwell used, because I wrote those down. And that's the answer that, of course, I have the continuing objection to, but that's the answer you're going to allow to be introduced. Is that right?
That was my understanding. Well, that's what I was trying to convey. Mr. Rucker, do you have questions or concerns about that? You think the ruling should be broader?
Well, I just think that also one of the things that I think would be that would put that in a context that I think also falls within my argument is the fact that Danny Joe Carter told Mr. Cardwell that the context of this statement that Tex told her to stay out of it was regarding the events that occurred in the SUV.
Well, and you asked Mr. Cardwell about that several times, and what I heard his ultimate answer to be, it was everything. Now, whether everything means the events in the SUV, maybe that's what your understanding was with Mr. Cardwell, but his response was, no, it was stay out of everything, or you don't have to be involved with everything. I don't know what everything means.
Didn't need to be involved in it at all.
And the it, you appropriately tried to explore. What's the it? Because of what your notes reflect.
Right.
But I heard the answer to the it being, well, that would be everything.
Everything. Okay.
All right?
So I'm limited to that statement. If you give it to me so I can write it down, I can make sure I have it verbatim, and then...
Well, I won't require it to be verbatim, but the gist of the question is what Mr. Cardwell recalls Ms. Carter saying to him that Mr. McIver said to her at the hospital about not staying involved in the situation. And again, those last few words I'll let you craft, but that will cabinet to not how did she feel Mr. McIver was behaving.
I understand.
Not that it was a strategizing mode, but getting to ultimately what we're getting at, Mr. McIver's words to Ms. Carter at the hospital.
Right.
Okay?
Okay. And Ms. Cardwell, you understand what we're talking about, right?
I do.
Okay.
Great. Anything else before we bring the jury in?
No.
Mr. Harvey, you, in your litany of concerns, also said you had a motion. The way we resolve this, do you withdraw that?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure we address it. Let's bring the jury in, please.
Yes, sir.
All rise for jury. Jury is all present and accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy Kane. We had a little bit more to work through than I anticipated, but we've done it. And the podium is back to Mr. Rucker. Mr. Cardwell remains under oath.
Let's see. Just a little leeway, Judge, just to get us back to where we were before we broke. So, Mr. Cardwell, I'm going to ask you a question, but I want to make sure we're back on the same page about where we are in the sequence of events. On the evening of October the 5th, at your home, Danny Jo Carter, Tom Carter, yourself, anybody else present?
My wife.
Okay. And there were conversations had between yourself and Danny Jo Carter. Yes?
Yes.
And during those conversations, I think where I asked you if she relayed to you the events that occurred at the hospital, Emory University Hospital, right after the shooting.
Yes.
And she did.
Yes.
And amongst the conversations that you had with her about those events at the hospital, did she tell you about a conversation that she had with the defendant at the hospital?
Yes.
Can you tell the jurors, did she tell you where within the hospital she had this conversation with the defendant?
If I recall correctly, it would have been in the waiting area. I don't know if it was a family waiting area or the general waiting area, but it was where they were waiting together.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, did Danny Jo Carter, on or about October the 5th, 2016, at your home, tell you anything that the defendant said regarding her staying out of it?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell the jurors what did she tell you the defendant said to her regarding her staying out of it?
She said he suggested that she could stay out of the entire matter.
That's what she told you on October the 5th?
Yes, sir.
About a week after the actual incident itself?
Yes.
Can you tell the jurors how long did Danny Jo Carter and her husband Tom remain at your home?
I believe they were there about a day and a half.
And can you tell the jurors on October the 6th of 2016, the next day, did you have conversations with the defendant yourself?
I received a call from Tex. I believe it was the next day. I'm not certain of it, but it was very soon after Tom and Danny Joe had stayed with us.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, had you spoken to him or received a call from him since those initial first day or two when you were exchanging text messages?
No.
Do you recall how many phone calls you would have received from Mr. McIver?
I believe that was the first phone call.
Okay. Any idea how many you received on the 6th? Or how many were exchanged is probably a better question.
I believe it was only one.
Only one?
I believe I didn't return his call until the next day.
Okay. I'd like to show you an exhibit. I've marked it as States 381. I want to see whether or not, if looking at it, helps to refresh your recollection about if there were any phone calls and how many phone calls were made between yourself and Mr. McIver. 381.
It appears as though there's at least 6 phone calls.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, when you look at States Exhibit 381, do you recognize your phone number, at least the last 4 digits?
I do.
We've kind of done that to protect your privacy, but if I could ask you, what are the last 4 digits of your phone number?
9686, but I also see 5169, and that's my office phone number.
Okay. Give me the first number.
9686, and then 5169 is the office phone number.
9686.
Yes, sir.
And the second number.
5169.
And the States Exhibit 381, as best you can recall, the events of October the 6th accurately reflect the phone calls between yourself and Mr. McIver on that day.
I believe they do.
I would tender States 381 as evidence.
Any objection to States 381? Admitted.
Let's Mr. Cardwell, put it on the screen.
Okay.
And that way it should pop up right here.
Okay.
And everybody can see it at the same time. And I'm zooming in this way so we can make sure we can see the numbers, okay? But this is States 381, calls between Claude Lee McIver and Dale Cardwell, correct?
Yes.
And can you just tell the jurors first, what time is the first phone call between your phone and Mr. McIver's phone?
11:48 a.m.
Okay. And we can see the originating party is?
Claude Lee McIver.
And the terminating party is?
9686, which is my cell.
Okay. And then right up underneath it, we have 5169. You've told us what number does that belong to?
That's my office number.
Office number. And so there are approximately how many phone calls from Mr. McIver to you before you call him back?
There's 4 phone calls to me.
Okay. And then you call him back?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's one more phone call that's exchanged and he calls you back?
Yes.
And so the last phone call exchanged between yourself and Mr. McIver on October the 6th of 2016 is what time?
Looks like it's 4 p.m. Or 10 p.m.
You converted to military time, 1610, right?
Yes.
And that 4:10 p.m. phone call, this ET, estimated time or elapsed time, how long did the
9
conversation
minutes.
last?
9 minutes, 17 seconds.
And can you tell the jury, did Mr. McIver share with you during these phone calls any of the facts and circumstances that surrounded the shooting inside of the SUV?
None.
And from that day to this day, Has there ever been any conversations with him where he shared those details with you?
None.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions, Judge.
Okay. Mr. Hartman, any questions for Mr. Cardwell?
I'm thinking of things slowly.
Okay.
Say that girl. Afternoon.
Dale, how are you? Can I call you Dale?
Absolutely, please do.
You and I actually have known each other for 150 years.
Yes.
100 of those are mine, and maybe 50 of those are yours, okay? That would be a cumulative total. Just to set the stage a little, you told us that you had met Billy Corey some time ago, correct?
Yes.
Would that have been the Dale Cardwell campaign for Senate?
Actually, I met him before that. I met him a number of years before that as a reporter covering a story he was involved in.
Okay. One of the things I think that was memorable would be the Dale Cardwell run for Senate, correct?
Yes, sir.
When you, I guess, asked Billy Corey's permission to go up on the tower that we've seen pictures of in this case, and stayed up in the tower in January for, my recollection, is like a week.
7 days and 7 nights.
As part of your campaign, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Corey,
What was the message of being up there for?
I'm cold.
Yes. Your Honor, I was trying to express that having an approval rating of 18% as Congress was ridiculous and unacceptable, and that someone had to state that in a way that would get people's attention.
Okay. You had met Mr. Corey, become friends with the Coreys, with Mr. Corey.
Yes.
Had become friends with Diane.
Yes.
Had become friends eventually after Diane and Tex got married. Became friendly with them as a couple as well.
Yes.
Correct. And it was somewhat of a tradition, perhaps, that on Friday afternoons there would be a gathering at Mr. Corey's office.
Yes, or at Tex and Diane's.
Or at Tex and Diane's. And I don't know whether they have cocktails or wine, but a social gathering.
Yes.
Right. And a convivial setting.
Yes.
And you knew Tex and Diane for a number of years, correct?
I did.
I will get back to that in a few minutes. As far as I understand, there was you allowed Danny, Joe, and Tom to come stay at your house on October 5th.
Yes.
Correct? They stayed at your house on October 5th.
Yes.
I guess the evening of October 5th. Did they leave on October 6th, or were they there on October 6th?
They were there for a number of hours in the morning, and then they left around noon, I believe.
Okay. And did you understand that they came there to avoid the media, correct? Or for other reasons, right?
Correct.
You know, there is a media presence when an event occurs that is somewhat of its own type of phenomenon, correct?
Yes.
And you got to say yes or no for the young lady here to take it down. And there are sometimes some stories that generate an intense amount of interest, correct?
Yes.
And an intense amount of publicity, correct?
Correct.
And news folks are always wanting to generate a story, right?
Yes.
The next story,
Yes.
right? And a unique story, correct?
Yes.
And one of the optimum fashions of generating the next story or a unique story is to try to talk to what is believed to be the participants in the event.
Correct.
And that's kind of a coup.
It is.
Okay. And you know at this particular time that this case generated a lot of publicity.
It did.
And the media do things like actually go to somebody's house, right?
Yes.
Camp out in the front yard, across the street, in public space, where nobody can say, or somebody can't say, you got to get out of here because it's a public space, right?
Yes.
Plus, it's part of the news gathering function in the First Amendment and all of that, right?
Yes.
So it's an intense spotlight.
It is.
And some people, as you know from your experience, some people can handle that, correct?
Correct.
Some people are comfortable with it, correct?
Yes.
Some people get their, what we call their 15 minutes of fame, correct?
Correct.
And some people want to stay away from it, right?
Yes.
And they want to be out of that limelight, correct?
Correct.
And they want to avoid that limelight, correct?
Correct.
And they don't want to talk to other people about what they may have seen, other people, the media, or even other friends of theirs about some sort of high-profile event, correct?
Correct.
Especially if it's a tragic event.
Yes.
And there's no other way to classify this as a high-profile, tragic event.
Correct.
That affected whole concentric circles of people.
Yes.
Right? So it wouldn't be unusual with all that media attention and media spotlight that someone who you knew to be unfamiliar with the spotlight, like Danny Joe or Tom Carter, to make a decision to stay away from that media spotlight, correct?
Correct.
And it wouldn't be unusual for someone who had just lost his wife in a tragic event, and who we all knew the media was interested in, to not offer up, even to friends, look, I want to tell you in detail about everything that happened. That you wouldn't find that as a reporter unusual, would you?
I would not.
Okay. So when Tex didn't offer anything to you, you just took that. You just took that and left it alone, right?
Early on, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I also understand that on the 6th, we talked about these phone conversations that you told us about in States Exhibit 381. After Tex called you several times, you didn't have a conversation with him that you recall during these phone calls, right?
We had a conversation.
Right. But you called Tex back, is what you told
Yes.
these folks. You called Tex back and you spoke to Tex.
I did.
And when you spoke to Tex that day, because that day being the 6th, these are the only conversations that we have records of, he talked to you about something completely unrelated.
Correct.
Correct? The interactions that you saw between Diane and Tex, you said playful. She was dominant. I heard that word. I think that word's going around. And she would give directions to Tex, correct?
Correct.
I think you said that. And when she wanted to do it, she was very forceful in doing that.
Yes.
But you were present for when those things happened.
I was.
And Tex always said, darling, fine, whatever you want to do, right?
Yes.
I mean, he was the most, not necessarily subservient, he was the most congenial of husbands when he was being directed, correct?
Good description.
Okay. And a lot of those directions related to food or drink. Do you remember her ever telling Tex not to eat the skinny cow or the cheese nips? That
Yes.
kind of thing. Tex, stop eating the skinny cow. Tex, stop eating the cheese nips. And he would say, okay, darling, I'll stop doing that, right?
Yes.
And from all accounts, and from everything you saw, they were a classically loving couple.
There were times that the directions had nothing to do with food or simple matters.
Okay, sure, of course, as in any relationship, right? But
Right.
he would still acquiesce in a non-argumentative fashion, correct?
There was a lawsuit that was involved, and she was a defendant, and he was their attorney. And
Okay.
they had disagreements about the direction of the suit.
Okay. All right, as do lawyers and clients all the time.
Yes.
That was a business relationship, and you know that Diane, no matter whether it was personal, financial, or business relationships, she was on point all the time.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I want to separate the business and the personal, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I have.
Mr. Rucker, any redirect for Mr. Cardwell?
Just a few.
Can't resist.
I couldn't resist. But it's going to be really, really short. Let me ask you, Mr. Cardwell, when Mr. Harvey asked you, hey, Tex didn't offer details to friends, and you could certainly understand that. You remember that conversation with him?
I do.
Right. Did you become aware that Tex had actually made some statements publicly about the details?
Yes.
And as a flag, Judge, can you approach real quick before I ask?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Cardwell.
Okay. Mr. Cardwell, not quite. This is a modern courtroom, and we empower our jurors. If you have any questions, jurors, pass your questions to the left, and Deputy King will collect them, and we will see what we're going to do. Thank you. Mr. Cardwell, you, in response to some of the questions, I think it was Mr. Harvey, doesn't matter, talked about how you noticed some tension between Ms. McIver and Mr. McIver, not about cheese whiz, but about some lawsuit that was going on. You mentioned that Mr. McIver was involved as attorney, and Ms. McIver was involved as defendant.
Correct.
Was Mr. McIver representing U.S. Enterprises / Ms. McIver, or was he the attorney on the other side, i.e. plaintiff's attorney?
U.S. Enterprises and Ms. McIver.
Okay, so it would have been, in effect, her lawyer professionally.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Rucker, do you have any follow-up for Mr. Cardwell? No, sir. Mr. Harvey?
No, sir.
All right, you're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
United States calls Officer Stroop.
Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give to the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Okay. You may have a seat. Too close to the mic. For court purposes, can you say your name and spell it?
Frank Stroop, F-R-A-N-K, Stroop, S-T-R-O-U-P-E.
Good afternoon, Officer Stroop.
Good afternoon.
Let's start by introducing yourself to the jurors. Tell them your name again and how you are currently employed.
Hey, Frank Stroop, police officer with the Emory Police Department.
How long have you been with the Emory Police Department?
About 6 years, 5 and some change.
Okay, tell the jury a little bit about your assignment within Emory PD.
I'm a patrol officer, so I respond to calls for service in and around the campus.
And working for the Emory Police Department, what does that mean as far as the area that you cover working for that agency?
So, as a part of the police department, we cover any property that Emory owns, as well as 500 yards extended from that, the end of its property.
Does that include sort of within campuses on that property, the hospital, the law school, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, all of Emory's property, law school, hospital, any building within the campus, as well as the hospitals in
Okay,
Midtown.
and what kind of shift do you work within your role as an officer there?
I work 12-hour shifts overnight, so 6:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m.
And in September of 2016, were you working the same shift that you just told the jury about?
Yes.
Okay, so you would have started that night 6:30 and then gotten off the next morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jurors on September 25th, 2016, were you working for the Emory Police Department?
Yes.
And at some point that night, do you get a call that brings you to the hospital?
I do. That happens when Officer Shaw with the public safety radios me and lets me know that there's a gunshot victim in the hospital.
Okay. So the jurors can understand. Tell them a little bit more about how it is that you receive a call when you are working on shift. How do you find out what's going on?
Okay, so normally if it's from public safety, if it's an incident in a hospital, they're on our same frequency, our radio frequency. So they would radio in and say they have whatever the situation is. Our dispatch would then see who is next in line to take a call, and then they would dispatch us to that call.
And how is it that Emory PD is different from Emory Public Safety, just so the jury can understand?
So the public safety is security, public safety, whereas the police department is post-certified police officers.
What does it mean to be post-certified?
It means that you've gone through POST stands for the Peace Officer Standards and Training, and that just means that we've gone through the academy and taken the same essential requirements required by all police officers, peace officers that work in the state of Georgia.
And in September of 2016, were you post-certified?
Yes.
And on that night, did you, as you just told the jury, receive a call or be dispatched from public safety?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 258 for the record. Take a look at that for me.
All right.
Let me know if you recognize that.
I do.
And do you recognize it? You did.
Yes.
How do you recognize 258?
I'm sorry. This is our CAD notes. That's computer-aided dispatch, and it is basically just gives a brief summary of when things happened, and the first page is basically dispatch operator notes about the call, and it plots when we got there, when we got the call, things like that.
And the document that you have in front of you, do you recognize that as the computer-aided dispatch that relates to the call that we've been talking about?
Yes.
All right. And does it appear to be changed or altered in any way from what's been recorded on that document?
No.
All right. Your Honor, State's going to tender 258 into evidence. Objection.
It's admitted, 258.
All right. So tell the jury on the sort of top there of State's Exhibit 258, what is the date and time of the call there?
It's 09/25/2016 at 22:16 or 10:16.
Okay. And when it says initial incident, what does the description there indicate to you?
It's signal 50 per CAD, person shot.
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
Signal 50 in CAD, person shot.
And what's a signal 50?
It's just signals and codes, like basically instead of having to say a person shot, say a signal 50.
Okay.
Abbreviates it.
On the second page of 258, tell the jury what we're looking at here on the second page.
Okay, this is the list of everyone who was dispatched by our dispatchers for the call.
Okay. And what do you see on the dispatch time that responds to or relates to you?
So I was dispatched at 10:18.
Okay. Can you tell from this document what time you actually arrived at the hospital?
Yes, 10:26, thereabout.
And we'll get to it, but at some time later was the Atlanta Police Department dispatched to the hospital?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And can you tell from this document who from the Atlanta Police Department responded?
From this document, no.
Okay. What time was the Atlanta Police Department dispatched?
Dispatched at 10:35.
And can you tell from this document what time they actually arrived at the hospital?
Yes, 11:24.
And who is the last person we see here?
That's Officer Nixon. He is an Emory police officer as well.
He is Emory?
Emory police officer.
Okay. And he actually responds out to the hospital as well?
Yes.
Okay.
He more responds to the valet area and then to where the vehicle was parked.
And what time does he come out to the hospital?
So he's en route at 22:45 and he arrives at 22:48.
All right, so we just told the jury you get dispatched at 10:18, arrive at 10:26.
Yes.
Okay. Tell the jurors when you arrive to the hospital at 10:26, what do you do?
Well, I kind of trying to figure out what's going on. I walk in the valet front door, past the desk, ask the person at the desk.
Can you keep your voice up nice and loud for me?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I come in through valet. I walk past the person at the front desk, ask them to buzz me in. From there, I meet with Sergeant Shaw with Public Safety, and he lets me, kind of fills me in what's happened so far. We figure out that a person's been shot, and they're in operating room 1, I think. And
When you say they, you're talking about the person who's actually been shot?
yes, that person. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That person is in operating room 1. From there, I'm taken to the last people who were with that person who brought them in the hospital.
And when you say you're taken to the last people, where are they when you eventually come into contact with those people?
I believe they were in the family consult room.
And tell the jurors, sort of in the layout there of the emergency room, first floor, where is the family consult room that you responded to?
So when you walk in valet, come in the front door, turn left. That's the entrance to the ED, emergency department. You walk past the OR, trauma rooms, and then make a left, and then a right, and then there's an ambulance bay doors, really in close proximity to that is the family consult.
And as you are making your way to the family consult room, at the point where you first come into contact with these individuals, do you know details about the shooting or how it occurred?
Not really. I get there, and that's why I'm meeting with them. I haven't really been told who did what or.
Okay. So at the time you're in the family consult room, when you first get there, do you even know who the shooter is?
No, I do not.
Okay. Tell the jury what you do once you get to the family consult room.
Well, I know that there are 2 people in the consult room.
And do you recognize one of the people in the consult room as the defendant in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recognize him here in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Okay. And
Right
just
over there.
for the record, unless you want to stipulate this time. Okay. And just for the record, Your Honor, I'd asked that the record reflect that the defense counsel has stipulated to the identity of Mr. McIver.
It should reflect that.
I'm going to show you Safety Exhibit 257
Okay.
on the screen. Who is that person?
I believe it's Patricia Carter.
Okay. And is States 257 or Miss Carter the other person in the family consult?
Yes.
So what happens once you get there?
Well, I know at that point that the defendant's wife has been shot, and that's all I know. So instead of talking to him about the incident, I think it's probably better to talk to the friend.
Why do you say that?
Well, because I don't want to talk with. If there's an alternative choice, I'd rather not talk about, someone's wife being shot by the husband. Also, I wasn't sure if he was kind of a victim in this incident, so we don't like to re-interview victims if possible.
Okay. Describe for the jury, when you come into the room, how do both Ms. Carter and the defendant appear to you?
Nervous, I guess. Anxious.
When you came into contact with the defendant, Mr. McIver, did you observe any tears, any crying at any point?
I don't remember him crying or tears or anything like that. I remember his eyes being kind of glassy.
As a result of your training and experience with the police department, does that indicate anything else to you?
Yeah, sometimes that's a indicative of someone who's been drinking.
Okay. So you decide at this point to not interview or talk to Mr. McIver.
That's correct.
What do you do next?
Talk to Ms. Carter and ask her to step out of the family consult room with me so I can, kind of get some details on what happened, because I have to figure out where the incident occurred and get the appropriate law enforcement agency involved.
And do you actually physically remove her from that room and take her somewhere else in the hospital?
Yes. It might not have been at that point. I think it was just away from the defendant.
And why do you say away from why do you separate her?
Well, usually when interviewing, a common practice to make sure that you're getting information that's not being filtered or influenced is a good word. It's not being influenced by anyone else. So whenever I do investigations, especially for things like this, I would talk to them separately.
Okay. And so do you actually do that, separate her from Mr. McIver?
Yes.
Where do you bring her in the hospital?
There is a waiting room near the valet area. It's attached to the emergency department, and I bring her to that area. Generally, it's less crowded. There's kind of two waiting areas in that in the ED waiting area, so I bring her to the less crowded.
And this other waiting area, is it right there in front as you come in, sort of the main doors to the emergency room?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. What do you do next once you get her there?
Speak with her and try to figure out, what happened. Basically, she tells me that the defendant shot his wife near Piedmont Park.
Okay. Do you keep your sort of initial conversation with her pretty brief for the most part?
Yeah, because once I figure out that, the defendant is actually the person who had the weapon at the time, kind of changes things a little bit. And
why do you say that?
Well, because it goes from being something that's potentially, a husband consoling and being concerned about his wife to potentially it being a crime.
Okay. And so what steps do you take as a result of that sort of shift what do you do next in your investigation because of that shift?
Well, after I speak with her and get the rest of the details, I say that she should wait in the waiting area, and then I proceed to contact my dispatch and have them notify Atlanta since it happened near Piedmont Park.
Okay. And so at that point, after you talked to Ms. Carter, you sort of gave her the instruction that she is to remain separate.
Yeah.
And at this point, she is not at the family consult room where you initially talk to her, correct?
Correct.
Is she, and she's in the other area of the hospital we talked about.
Yes.
And so, who do you contact next?
So I contact my dispatcher and let them know the location that was given to me. They then check based off the geographical location and discover that it's Atlanta, that it occurred in Atlanta's jurisdiction. So they make a call to have Atlanta en route.
Okay. And I'm going to show you again, it's Exhibit 258. I'm going to show you some of the notes we see here on the CAD. Okay, so tell the jury about the first sort of notation there at 2217 in the CAD.
2217. Okay, this is the initial notes. A possible signal 50, unknown location where it occurred. Patient is inside the ER.
Okay, and that's at 2217, so about a minute after this call even came in. And then what about the next one?
2223.
2218.
I'm sorry. So that's the patient will be a female. No other information is known at this time.
All right. What about the notation at 2223?
223 is clear on the call. 223, which is now Sergeant Ritchie at the time he was Officer
Which
Ritchie.
is now confirmed.
Sorry. 223 was clear on the call. He's a sergeant now, but at the time he was the officer in charge, and he was supervising that night. So whenever a call that it's kind of different than not just a normal run-of-the-mill like a accident or something like that, the supervisor would clear on the radio just to let dispatch know that they heard the call and they're cleared. You know, they understand that the call is, being dispatched.
All right, and was he your supervisor that evening?
Yes.
And so would the supervisor actually, based on what you remember and this CAD, did he actually respond out to the scene with you?
He did.
Okay, and do you know if he arrived about the same time that you did?
Yes, per the CAD, same time.
But the investigation and sort of the questioning and the decisions to separate that we've been talking about, who's responsible for those decisions?
That was me once I spoke with Ms. Carter. Since he's a supervisor and we had this type of incident going on, I believe he was on the phone making our notifications just so that our chain of command is aware of what's going on. If something unusual like a shooting, some person being shot shows up at Henry, then we'll let our chain of command know just as a matter of protocol.
All right. Let's go up to the last two notes that we see. What time do we see APD is standing by with the vehicle?
That's at 1:10 a.m.
All right. And what's the next note on the CAD, or the last note?
It's 1:20, and that's 216, which is my badge number. I ascertained the patient status. Patient is now 1056D, which means the patient's condition, and the D stands for deceased.
All right. And so at 1:20, you are radioing in, and 216 is you said?
Mm-hmm.
At 1:20, you're radioing in that Ms. McIver has actually passed. She's now deceased.
Yes.
Before you radioing that Ms. McIver is deceased, you separated Ms. Carter from the defendant, and you called into dispatch. What's the next thing that happens?
At this point, I realized that we have a mobile crime scene, or where the shooting occurred, and it's been valet parked. So I believe that I talked to Sergeant Ritchie and asked him, can we get Officer Nixon to respond at the scene and secure that vehicle, figure out where valet parked it, and have him watch it while APD responds.
And so at this point, you're sort of waiting for APD to arrive.
Yes.
Do you ever leave the hospital or leave Ms. Carter, unsupervised?
That would be the period. After I spoke with her and got the details out radio, went to talk to Sergeant Ritchie, relayed the information that I had, and then from there thought about the car being valet parked and needing to be secured since it's a crime scene.
Okay, so you want to put your eyes on the car if possible?
Yes.
And are you able actually personally to go out and identify the car in question?
Eventually, I am. I didn't do it right away because I knew Officer Nixon was going to do that. So, but eventually, yes.
And when you see the car, where is it?
It's valet parked. I don't remember the level though.
Okay, still on the Emory campus though?
Yes, it's in lower gate parking deck.
Okay. Is that consistent with where somebody would park if it was valeted?
Yes, the valet officer, the valet folks drive vehicles over there and park them kind of the lower levels.
Okay, I'm going to show you what's been admitted. It states 129. You recognize that car?
Yes.
And how do you recognize it?
That is the vehicle that was valet parked at Lower Gate South.
Okay, and were you able to look at State's Exhibit 88 and 129?
Yes.
And tell the jury, what did you just look at the exterior, or did you make any observations about the inside of the car as well?
So we didn't go into the vehicle. We just kind of looked in from the outside to see if there was anything we could see. We saw, or I saw, and Officer Nixon saw that there was a handgun in the back seat directly behind the passenger seat, and there was a small bullet hole, looked like somewhere around the center of the seat.
Okay, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 99. Do you recognize what you see in State's Exhibit 99?
Yes, that looks like the handle of the gun under the purse.
Position of the gun, they're sort of underneath the purse, partially in that bag. Is that the same position you saw the gun when you observed it that night?
I can't be sure. I think so.
Okay. And what about State's Exhibit 107? One moment. May I approach?
You may.
I don't know why I asked that. I know you don't require that. All right, I'm going to show you 107 and let me know if you recognize that.
Yes, that is where it looked like the entry point of the bullet was.
Okay, because 107, a fair and accurate depiction of the scene we've been telling the jury about.
Yes.
I'm going to tender 107.
Submit. Did you spell your last name B Bravo or P Pelican?
P. Pelican. Sorry.
Thank you.
Stroop.
You said that's 107?
Yes.
Thank you.
And so what we see in State's Exhibit 107, is that what you were able to see as you kind of are looking in the windows there?
Yes.
Okay. And then with the image that you see in 107, is that consistent with what you observed there that night?
Yes.
Was that big old number 2 on the back of the seat?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, the 2 wasn't there.
Okay.
Sorry.
The hole that we see
Yes,
right
that's
in the
that.
is that the same?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we're sort of, you told the jury about this sort of influx period where you are waiting on APD. At some point, do you go back into the hospital?
Yes. Once I figure out that he is the person that had the firearm in his hand, I go back to the family consult room to kind of check on things.
And what do you see there?
I can't remember exactly when someone who said that he was Mr. McIver's legal defense or attorney or something like that.
Okay, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 347. Yeah. All right, do you recognize the person that you see in 347?
Yes.
Okay, is that the guy that you're talking about now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, At
Yes.
some point, you come into contact with this gentleman
Yes.
and tell the jury what happens then.
I believe he asked where the defendant is, and I show him to where he is.
Okay, you actually direct Mr. Maples, or this guy that identifies himself as a lawyer, back to the defendant.
Yes.
And where is the defendant at the time that you direct him there?
In the family consult room, I believe.
Okay. What happened next?
From the outside looking in, he came in kind of like a managing the situation.
What makes you say that about what you observed?
He just.
I'm sorry, just without speculating, Your Honor, just describing what you observed.
Sure.
Oh, okay. He presented, I believe, maybe a business card, and said he was a attorney, and he went into the room where the defendant was and started speaking with him.
Okay. When, at some point that evening, while Mr. Maples, or the attorney, is talking to the defendant, are you able to hear a statement that the defendant makes?
Yes.
Okay, so just objection, if we're talking about statements that are between Mr. Maples and Mr. McIver.
Well, obviously, they're communicating in a way that a third party can hear it, so I would say that they're not privileged, which is why I asked that question.
Okay, if you could establish a little more foundation as to whether there was surveillance going on or someone was in plain view, I'll be in a better position to assess the objection.
Tell the jury, as you are, sort of where this happened. We talked about who you saw and what your observations of him were, but tell them a little bit more about where this conversation took place.
It would have taken place in the family consult room, and the door was open. And I'm sorry.
I'm going to use this mic. Yeah. If you need to, you can step down. It's easier to see what I'm going to show on the screen.
Okay.
As long as you speak up.
Okay.
And just let me know if you recognize the hallways that we see here on State's Exhibit. I'll get it in a second for the record.
Yes, this would be the.
There's a pointer right there on the table right there.
This would be the ambulance entrance door. This is like an ice water station, and right next to that, right here, is the family consult room. Look at this diagram. The door is ajar.
Okay. I'm going to play it forward. Can you just tell me if you see where you were standing?
It was kind of in passing, so kind of, right. I wasn't in the room. I was outside of the room.
Okay. And at that point, while you were standing outside of the room and you hear this conversation, are you attempting to investigate any crime or conduct any surveillance at that particular point?
No.
Is this something that you are able to hear while the door is open and you're out in the hallway?
Yes.
And where, if you know, was Mr. McIver and his lawyer inside this little room we're seeing here?
There are chairs here. I don't know if this is set up exactly how it was that day, but I believe that the defendant was on this side of the room and the lawyer was on that side.
Okay, so just for the record, you're sort of indicating the right side of this little family consult room,
Yes.
and the lawyer you're saying is sort of over on the other side.
Yes.
Do you remember if there was anyone else inside the room at that point?
No, there was not.
And the door, the way we see it here in the exhibit, was the door in the same way?
Yes.
I can't see it, so if you just describe for the record, because you had said something about a door being ajar versus open.
Just describe for the court as best you can what the door looked like when you heard this conversation.
It was open enough so where I could see both parties in the room and hear what they were saying.
Was it more open or less up against the wall, fully open, like we see in the image right there?
Approximately the same.
Okay. Is there room to put a chair, just so the court kind of understands, since you can't see it? Is there room to put a chair behind that door, how open it is now?
No, you couldn't stand. There wouldn't be room, I guess, behind the door.
Could you walk in, the way the door was when you heard, which you may get to talk about in a minute or may not, could you have walked through the door without bonking into the door?
Yes.
Okay.
You can have a seat.
It's a legal term.
Technically.
We use it at home all the time. Someone bonks their head and don't cry, you're going to be okay.
On the diagram I just referenced for the record, it states 234.
234.
So at this time, the state would, I'm going to go into that statement with the court's permission.
I have a couple more questions for Officer Stroop, and then I'll see if there's a renewal of the objection. Officer Stroop, were the defendant and the lawyer speaking in hushed tones or in tones such that standing where you were standing, it was plainly audible?
I heard them. That's the only thing I could say.
Let me ask it a different way then. Was it a leaning in, talking hand over ear?
There were no hands over ears, but they were definitely leaned in. From what I remember, like leaning forward.
How much space was between the two of them? As best you can remember.
They were close enough so where they were talking loud enough so where I could hear from outside, but where they wouldn't be shouting at each other. That's the best way I can say it.
Okay. But if we look at two jurors right there, no matter which two, I mean, were they that close together, or was it more like the distance you and I are? I don't have to yell for you to hear me.
Yeah, I understand. It was less room than this, but not that close.
Okay. Do you have any foundational questions you want to ask in support of your objection? In other words, you want to voir dire the witness in connection with your objection? Okay, I'll allow the question.
I maintain my objection.
No doubt. I didn't hear any withdrawal of the objection. I'm going to overrule the objection in light of the setting that has been described and let you ask your question again.
Right. The conversation that we've been talking about, the statements that the defendant made that you were able to hear, tell the jury, what were they? What did you hear?
He said something to the effect of, what do I say?
I'm sorry, so just
I'm
clarify
sorry.
which he...
The defendant said, what do I say? Or what's the plan? Something like that.
As you are making your way past the room, do you eventually go into that family room?
No.
What do you do next after you hear this conversation?
I kind of just keep going and ensure that, try and ensure that everyone is still separated and things like that, and kind of wait for APD to arrive.
Tell the jury, 'cause I forgot to ask you, what are you wearing that evening? Are you in uniform?
Yes, I am in a navy blue uniform, duty belt.
Okay. Are you dressed in a way that you are easily identified as an officer of some kind?
Yes.
And with you that night, do you have anybody as your supervisor kind of walking around with you?
Officer Richie at the time was the officer in charge, so he was the supervisor at the time. Yes.
And is he in uniform that evening?
Yes.
Dressed in the same way as you are?
Yes.
Can you just describe for the jury the race, height, weight of your supervisor?
He is a light-skinned African-American male. Usually has a goatee or closely shaven beard and bald head.
Okay. What is the next thing that you do before APD arrives?
I can't remember exactly from that point. I think at that point it was trying not to start interviewing and waiting for them, containing everything until they're there. You know.
And at some point, do they arrive?
Yes.
Who arrives from APD, if you remember?
Detectives Ricker and Robeson L.
And are Detectives Ricker and Robeson L, if you remember, dressed in the same way that night?
As me?
As each other?
As each other? No.
Okay, and what do you mean when you say no?
They're believed detectives, so sometimes that calls for different variations of dress for whatever the specific assignment is. So they might not have been matching. Sometimes detectives will have a suit on. Sometimes it'll be more of a Class B style uniform, which is kind of khaki pants and maybe a polo shirt.
Do you remember if both Ricker and Robeson L were in uniform that night or that morning?
I do not remember them being in Class A's like I was in. I don't exactly remember what they were wearing.
Okay, just a uniform doesn't jump out to you.
No.
But do you come into contact with Officer Ricker and Robeson L before you take them back to the family room?
Yes.
And do you give them sort of a cliff notes on what you know at that point?
Basically, I just kind of re-explain everything and let them know what I've got from that point.
Did the court want me to, I don't want to keep any jurors late.
How much more do you have with this officer?
Probably just a few more minutes on direct.
Okay, well, we won't finish with his testimony, so if you think you could wrap up, that's a natural break point. If you think, if we go 3-4 more minutes, is that all right? If it's not, we'll stop. It's not all right.
Emergency.
Uh-oh, okay. How would you learn that you had an emergency sitting there? You just showed me your back watch. You can't do research on your back watch, can you?
I can, but it's my oldest daughter. She's pregnant, so I don't know if she's in emergency or not.
Okay, well, why don't we stop? Hopefully you'll keep us posted as to what's going on. Number 61. And we'll pick up with Officer Stroop in the morning, 9 a.m. You guys enjoy your evening. I think the NC2As are back on. That's safe to watch. That has nothing to do with, at least I don't see on the witness list if someone from Loyola or Duke or something. Never know. Enjoy your evening. No outside research. Juror 61, please keep us posted. If there's something that we need to know, hopefully it's all okay. And we'll see everyone at 9 in the morning. Thank you so much.
All rise for the jury. All right, you may be seated.
Officer Stroop, you can stay standing because I'm going to let you go. I appreciate your time. We'll need to be back, unfortunately, tomorrow at 9. I hope you're not working the night shift tonight. Drink a lot of coffee if you are, because we'll need you here a little before 9. We'll pick up. Doesn't sound like there's a whole lot left on direct, but then we'll need to see what's going to happen on cross-examination as well. We appreciate you coming across county lines to be with us. Thank you, Chris. State, anything we need to work through this evening?
No, just I think we are working through the redactions. I don't think there are objections at this point. Right?
You did ask Mr. Samuels.
I need to ask Mr. Samuels, just based on our conversations in passing.
This would be Mr. McIver and team's statement to law enforcement.
Correct.
Okay.
And we hope to have the finished product for review by council to look at prior to. We got our IT person kind of. You got it already?
He's out of the loop. It's done. I've given it to Mr. Samuel. He's reviewing it now. It's my understanding there's no objection, but I gave him, he said that he would confirm that 100%.
Sure. No, I hope he watches it, but I would hope that you would know already, because you've been going back and forth. He should know what pages and lines are on there. So really ought to just be an exercise of whoops, did something get in there inadvertently during the technical
And I gotta
process?
check it myself tonight, so, but we're good.
Okay. Mr. Rucker, any update on the media side of things?
I haven't had a chance to confer yet. Ms. Watt Coach is working on that. I see her in the courtroom. I'll have a report for you first thing in the morning.
Okay.
I did have a chance to speak with Ms. Counts during the lunch break.
How'd that go?
Very interesting. She's doing some checking for me, and hopefully she'll call me back this evening. And once she does, I think we can wrap it up. Hopefully.
Okay. We'll see. Super. Anything else from the state?
No.
All right. Thank you, state. Anything from the defense? So you'll be ready to go. It sounds like your process will start pretty early on in the morning, and you'll do what you need to do, and we'll move on. Are we shifting now into law enforcement series of witnesses, or
Yes.
we hand it off to Ricker or Robeson L. and then Smith, etc.?
Yes.
Okay. Helpful to know. Great. We'll keep our fingers crossed about Juror 61 and go from there. See everyone a little before 9. Thank you.